Just hey guys, welcome back to Falcon Central Radio, part of the Pro Football Central Radio Network. I am your host, Aaron Freeman. As you can see on your screen, a former co-host of the show, Scott Karasik. Today is a sort of day three hangout for the draft. If you guys, day three is pretty chill day, a lot of stuff going on. And just wanted to provide you some content, some Falcons content, hanging out. We'll have a couple of guests rolling through, and just basically send invites to half of Falcons Twitter to say, if you want to come on, hang out for a little bit, talk some football, talk life and whatnot. And the good thing is on this platform, you guys can join the show as well. And so if you guys want to jump in and ask some questions, talk some football, hang out for a little bit, you will also have an opportunity. So, basically most of today, I will try to do my best to I guess just like moderate a chat, because, there may be a point during the day where we might have like 10 people on the show at the same time. So we'll just sort of see how that goes. And if I can juggle that. But hey, Scott, man, I'll stop talking. How you doing, man?
I'm doing good. Life's been good. It's been interesting. It's been nice not having to do a podcast every Tuesday night for the last year or so. Oh, there's Tony.
Good morning, fellas.
Good morning,
up, Tony.
How you guys doing?
Good. I see that your team's been doing what we did on the second day, which was draft a whole bunch of fat dudes.
I don't know about it. Well, I guess on day one, Derek Brown, right? I mean, he's a big boy. He took up that whole chair, and then Yoder Gross-Matos. He's a big guy. He's a big fella. And Chin is, I guess when you say fat, he is a large human being. He's like 218 pounds and just
for a safety, that's fat.
Yeah, I mean, he looks mean.
But so, Tony, how you liking the Panthers draft so far?
Yeah, I gotta say I'm 100% happy with it. I think we talked a lot about it on draft night when it came to Derek Brown, is that you can fall in love with the sexiness of an Isaiah Simmons, right? And you can kind of get, starstruck or I think bogged down a little bit in the analytics kind of component where it's like, are you really going to take a D tackle in the top 10? Sometimes you just got to pick people that can play ball, and that dude can straight ball. So, and we couldn't stop the run last year at all. So very happy. I think it was somewhat of a safe pick, but I think it's going to do a lot more for the team than people give it credit for. And then day two, you got to be happy is that we have no defense. So, I mean, you're just hoping that the scouting reports for these guys are right. Matt Rule has connections to Penn State. He was he played football there. So, and I guess that's how Gross-Matos, I haven't even looked at his first name that closely. He's got a nice day. What a story on this dude. Did you guys hear the sad story?
Dude,
I thought I couldn't get any more sadder from the stories that had happened earlier, and then that one hit.
Yeah, when he was being mocked to the Falcons a lot early in the offseason, I read up on it and with the tragedy surrounding his brother and his dad. So,
jeez, what do you guys think about these players? You kind of look more at college prospects and have stronger opinions about, I've gotten to the point where I just kind of like to know who we picked and start thinking about how that helps or doesn't help our team rather than what could be, couldn't be. So you guys watch these people closely, and I know you have opinions. What do you guys think about particularly the day two picks?
I honestly haven't followed the draft at all this year, except for cursory because I've been so busy at work. So for me, it's really just been who did I like watching during the regular season in college football. Gross-Matos was impressive. Chin, I went back and watched him because I always love watching the day two, day three guys, and Lenore Ryan is a team that always seems to go up against the Citadel at some point every like 3 years. We always bring them in for some stupid home game where we're playing the D2 team. So we've seen them. And then I know Derek Brown's a monster. And I know Marlon Davidson's a monster because my wife is a Bama fan. So the last 4 years, I've seen those dudes wrecking Bama's offensive line from the inside and sometimes from the outside with Davidson. So to me, those are the guys that really stood out to me from both of our teams' drafts. I was kind of lukewarm on AJ Terrell. I read some scouting reports on him after the pick happened, and I was like, all right. My initial thought of those, so I'm not really seeing a huge – I see a guy that fits what the Falcons do. I don't see a guy that's like instant Pro Bowler or instant top corner the way that Desmond Trufant was. And then Matt Hennessy, I went back and watched him like right after the Falcons picked him, and dude's a monster. He's just a beast center. And I'd love to see him play left guard because I think he'd be better than Carpenter.
For me,
yeah. What are your thoughts, Aaron?
I like the Falcons draft so far. I think they've, done a good job with their picks, getting guys that, impacted some need positions. With the Panthers specifically, like I like the Derek Brown pick. He may not be everybody's, as you say, sort of analytical heartthrob, but I think when you're rebuilding the Panthers defense, which is what they're going to have to do over the next couple of years, if you want to start with the heir apparent to KK Short on your D line, Carolina's done a great job over the last 2 decades drafting, big time D tackles with Chris Jenkins and KK Short. And,
best.
So I feel like Derek Brown fits right in with that legacy. So I like that pick a lot. I'm not the biggest fan of Yetur Gross-Matos or YGM or whatever you want to call him. I thought he was kind of overrated, but I know a lot of other people that specialize in watching pass rushers like him.
Why do you say that? Why do you say that? Just
I mean, for me, like watching him, he's a guy, like he's a big guy. He's got size that you want, but like he's not very physical. He's not very powerful. He's a guy that wins with like hands and quickness, and I didn't see a guy that really had great quickness that I thought was going to be that effective winning against NFL offensive tackles. Like, I don't think he's like a bad player. I just don't see him being a high level pass rusher. I just think
like the jump off isn't just elite. It doesn't seem like.
Yeah, like the player he reminded me of was
the only times I saw him play this year was Ohio State and I want to say Purdue, and he was destroying both those lines, and maybe that's why I like him a lot, but he seemed plenty physical enough there.
Yeah, he had some, like, I don't think he's a bad player by any means. I think he's to me, like the player that he reminds me of, he's like a speed rusher that doesn't have elite speed. And he has the ability, the potential to be a power rusher, but he just didn't really show it that much.
I think he's going to be a power guy. I mean, his builds, what I do like about this type of defensive end is that I think, well, first, we got to look at this a little bit in the context of Carolina's past drafts, right? Of how this pick and Derek Brown fit into this. Last year, we invested a lot in the leaner outside linebacker type edge rusher, right? We get Brian Burns. We drafted Christian Miller. We have from the past before that, Marquise Haynes. And so we have a lot of these guys that are meant to be kind of stand-up rushers. And then we lose Mario Addison. We're very thin on the interior line. So you bulk that up immediately. And I think the Gross-Matos pick is that if you look at him, and what is his weight and stats? Let me see what it is.
I think it's like 6'5", 265, something like that.
Oh, really? He looked bigger than 265.
He does look bigger than 265. I will give you that.
Yeah, I would say, he is 265.
He's a solid 280, but he's not.
That's what I thought. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. So I expect him to kind of be that type of defensive end, maybe trying to at least get him up to 275, 280, and be kind of the counterweight to Brian Burns. So I think, that's where I do think sometimes you can get too slim on defensive end in the NFL. And if you're that kind of tweener between the 4-3 type of D end and the 3-4, it's kind of hard because they just get muscled around a little bit. So we need somebody that is just a power rusher too. So I hope he can fill that role.
No, I think the good thing, like, again, he's not a guy that I love as an individual, but I think going to Carolina where he's going to be opposite Brian Burns, he's going to be beside Derek Brown, and for the next 2 years or whatever with KK Short, basically he's just got to be the fourth guy. And so I think he can be the third or fourth guy in your pass rush. I just don't know if he's going to be the number one or the number two guy, but he's probably not going to have to be that in Carolina because of Brown and Burns for the long term. So it's not a bad pick by any means. He's just not a guy that I absolutely love.
I would caution.
Short's already 31 years old.
What's up?
Short's already 31 years old. I feel like he just got drafted like 3 years ago.
It was 2012. Yeah, I know. It's crazy. That was, think about that, Scott. That was like 2 years before you, or a year before you, railing on Darrell Williams for not even being a guard.
And what happened to Darrell Williams again?
He got hurt a lot. He had one good year, but he was
one average year.
And I'm telling you, man, Panther fans, they acted like signing him to that 1 year deal. All of a sudden, our offensive line was going to be great. And I was telling them,
Using him at left tackle too, and I was like, "Oh, they're trying to get Cam killed."
Oh God, yeah.
Why did you wait until after Cam Newton left to get a left tackle? That's what I want to know.
Hey, we still don't look. This is
Okung is a good left tackle.
Who?
Russell Okung. He's a good left tackle.
Oh yeah. We did. We got a little patchwork. Yeah. And finally, we should have gotten him. To be honest, in 2016, instead we went with Matt Khalil. He went to the Chargers. Here to answer that question, Scott, is a Pandora's box. But I will point out is that Cam Newton is the type of player that gives you the luxury of not having to try to do much. And the Panthers, they just let Cam, they just said this for a decade, Cam, you do your thing, and hopefully we'll try to get you a defense that will do their thing, because they were $1 short, a day late and $1 short. If you think about it, you brought this up, the offensive line, right? Is that by the time they figured it out, we listened to Dave Gettleman tell us the answer is on the roster. The answer is on the roster. We moved Byron Bell over to left tackle, and then this was the press line they gave us. He's left-handed, so that gives him an advantage at left tackle. Right? So then we do that. It doesn't work. We did some patchwork in 2015, which was okay. It worked enough, except for our right tackle. Mike Remmers was trash. And I don't care what people say. By week 12, Remmers is good from weeks 1 through 12, and then he hits a wall, right? So we had that. You try finally to address it by bringing in Matt Khalil, which is he's the worst out of the whole bunch. The worst out of the whole bunch. That dude has fleeced more teams for more money. Bull.
Great.
I hate that.
As a rookie. He was absolutely spectacular as a rookie.
1 year.
NFL pass rushers realized, hey, this guy can't turn to the right. He can go left. He can guide you outside all day. But on an inside move, he can't turn right. He's like a Zoolander.
So they then go out and draft Moton and the following year Love, a day late, $1 short. Greg Little, not Love. And the same with putting weapons around Cam Newton, to be honest, is that by the time we figured out, hey, Jericho Cotchery is the best player on the damn team, then you go and you get Christian McCaffrey, and then you try to get DJ Moore, and by that point, Cam's hurt. It's a day late and $1 short. Oh, but I did want to caution you guys on one thing about the draft stuff, about the gross matos. I'm going to caution Panther fans more so than you guys. Defensive ends generally, unless you're like a top 10 DN, take a while to develop in the NFL. So I really like the gross mato, but I don't expect him to even contribute till year 2 or 3, to be honest. We saw Charles Johnson on the other side of Julius Peppers take 2 years to 3 years to develop. So I would see his big impact maybe coming next year.
I think Charles Johnson is honestly a good comp for him too.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, when I watched him, good with his hands, not overtly physical, but has the tools there to become overtly physical. I don't think it's an attitude issue. I don't think he's trying to play like a speed rusher. I think that's what his coaching has been telling him to play like. I think you get him the right defensive line coaching. You utilize his power, and you can see a guy who turns into that next Charles Johnson, which while that's not the best pass rusher in the NFL, every NFL team would love to have a Charles Johnson as their number two pass rusher.
Yes, you would, because it's just like a lunch pail guy, man. He's just going to get 10 sacks.
Yep. 7-8 sack guy, lunch pail guy who comes in, stops the run.
Yeah.
What NFL coach doesn't want that kind of guy as his number 2 rusher? That's kind of what I'm hoping Takk McKinley eventually turns into, and hopefully it's this year, because at this point he's not a number 1 rusher. He's a 7-8 sack at most kind of guy who plays the run decently, and he does give his all every snap. I will give him that, but he just does not have that number 1 rusher style. And maybe it's because Vic Beasley was just trash the last 2 years. But I think I think Fowler will help Takk take that next step and let Takk become that Charles Johnson type guy. At least we don't have Ray Edwards anymore.
See, you guys are bringing up these bad words on the show, man.
I know, Aaron.
Ray Edwards, like this is ridiculous. Byron Bell. I mean, I ain't even heard that name mentioned in years, man. This is like.
How about
cons?
The sad part is when you kind of wax nostalgically for Byron Bell. You know what I'm saying? Like when it gets worse than that's like when it's like that's a bad thing. I tell you this is we gave Byron Bell so much shit back in the day, and then we got Matt Khalil, and I was like, guys, bring back Byron, dude.
Oh man, it's crazy. Well, looks like we're about 10 minutes away from day 3 kicking off.
10 minutes away from anything actually happening.
I have really liked the draft this year.
The virtual draft?
Yeah, like it's because we've been doing these streams since when? Well, you've been doing them even longer than us, Aaron, but I know that I've been doing this since 2013. And
that's about when Aaron and I started our show when we back in the day.
Yeah.
About 2013. And then before that, I've been doing the streams with Ethan Hammerman and Alex Wiederspiel, Kvetching Draft Nicks. That was back in 2011, 2012. That was a while ago.
I love it because it kind of gives this. I mean, I don't like to call myself media. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm just a person, but it kind of gives this a little more credibility.
No, I hear you.
I think any one of us could get hired by a radio station tomorrow and produce a decent show, though.
I go on every Friday on this local radio station. I have a blast. I just do it for fun with my friend that I grew up with. He has a sports show, and he does, and so we talk NFL. But I think what the virtual draft has kind of done is made the reporters and the people and seem more like normal people instead of just like some special superstars in a studio, you know?
Yeah.
What's crazy is when your friends from high school are like agents at CAA, and like the kid that I sat next to in Hebrew school is one of the agents over at CAA doing these contracts. He's like, yeah, I did Pat McAfee's contract. I'm in the punters division. I'm like, oh, is that where they put you before they work you up? And he was like, yes, actually. He gets like, he has like Ryan Allen's contract. He does like punters.
I think there's something else that's entertaining to me about it is that we have been doing this for fun for 7-8 years. You know what I'm saying? Like, just that's what I do it for fun. And now to see people like humbled to my level, like they're on quarantine and they have to do it. And I'm like, hell yeah, let's get up on the computer and have a stream.
And it's like, if you haven't done this before, you're not 100% sure how it works. And you just want to be like, hey, if you need any tips on how to do this at home and like at least make your shit look like it's a decent place to do your show, hit me up.
Mute your microphone if you got a bunch of background noise. Use some earbuds, jerks. That's what I want to tell everybody. Or
at least be smart enough to try and figure out how to set your stuff up like their monitors. Like that's the way I have it set up. I'm in probably the best acoustic room in the house right now.
All right, so
I have my speakers all set up like they're
on day 3, Aaron.
I'm expecting him to get a linebacker sometime in round 4. And then a return specialist maybe. And then after that, I don't know.
A return specialist?
I think they might go.
I don't think Justin Hardy.
What?
Is he going to replace Justin Hardy?
Yeah, Hardy's walked and was not good for the 1 year he was a return.
Say that. Do not
look. I'm a Justin Hardy fan. He's a good wide receiver. He was just a terrible punt return.
He was a terrible return specialist.
What?
Yeah, he was bad.
Oh gosh.
I like Hardy, but he just was like a 5 yards on a punt return kind of guy. Like that's all he could get. I mean,
he's not a home run hitter by any chance. But I tell you this is that he's real consistent back there. It's like I don't feel like you worry. We've had sometimes you get the punt the ball up and you're like, oh shit, this is not gonna, is that so at least Hardy I felt like was shorthanded. He also went to my alma mater.
No, I love Justin Hardy as a wide receiver. He had no business being a punt returner. The Falcons basically were like, they looked in the wide receiver room and were like,
this is the guy that doesn't drop the ball, dude.
Yeah,
he doesn't drop the ball. For the Panthers, man, we need a offensive lineman. That's what I feel like. It's just like we got to start putting bodies in the trenches because we've got Okung, who is a 1 year, 1 year patchwork deal. We do have Moten. We've got Greg Little. Hoping Greg Little, a former second-round pick last year, can turn into something. He seems to me, I think he's more fit to be a tackle. A lot of people are saying that he's going to move into the guard position this year. He's so long and like athletic. I feel like it's a waste of talent to put him at guard. But Moten has played well at right tackle. We lost Greg Van Roten to free agency. Not that that was anything to cry about. He's 31 years old and a walk-on who got a big deal. So I think the Panthers just got to find some big bodies to put at guard and center for the future.
So
yeah.
They're not trusting Dennis Daly or John Miller to be those guys?
I hope not. I wouldn't.
Dennis Daly got wrecked in both of those Falcon games last year.
I wouldn't.
Adrian Claiborne and Alan Bailey, they were wrecking that dude. Even Vic Beasley was wrecking that dude. So that's not a positive sign for his future.
Well,
he was a 5th round rookie player, right?
That's fair.
Yeah, I don't know why they had so much faith in him, but I guess beggars can't be
No,
choosers.
they didn't have faith in him. They had everybody else to put there.
I think as a left guard, actually a solid fit though. Like I like Dennis Daly as a left guard. I don't like him as a tackle at all. But he's a guard. Like he's a total guard.
That's what he was drafted to be too. Is that we just had Greg Little last year who was out with concussions. So who did we even have to put at? Yeah, like you said, we even had Darrell Williams at left tackle.
Yeah. I mean,
Paradis is good. So if you had, you could put Daly, and then you could have Moten slide over to right guard, which is probably his best fit, and then have Greg Little at right tackle, and maybe you have a decent line. It's a little patchwork, but I mean, it's better than what it could have been, which is just complete trash.
What offensive linemen are out there right now that are worth? There any? Like, are you at the draft where it's all like it's kind of like whoever's out there right now is a future prospect?
Kind of. Prince Tega Winogo, very good left tackle. Saw him at Auburn a lot. Big fan of his. I like Tyler Badass out of
Tyler what?
Tyler Badass.
It's Biadasz.
It's BIADASZ. So I just shorten it and I call him Tyler Badass.
I want that dude.
Yeah.
I'm buying that jersey.
I see. That's why I want the Falcons to draft him, because I'd be like, if you get Hennessy and Badass and you put them right next to each other, and then you got Strom, and then you got Matthews, like these just sound like offensive linemen. They don't sound like, I don't know how else to put it. Like these just sound like guys that should be playing offensive line in Atlanta.
There's some decent offensive linemen I'm seeing left on the board.
Oh yeah, Nick Harris out of Washington. He's a hell of a center. Ben Barch out of St. John. He's pretty solid. I liked Sadiq Charles when I saw him at LSU. He was the worst of the 5 linemen they had, but he's still probably a fourth, fifth round prospect. And he was playing their left tackle role. And I think he looked the worst because he had to play left tackle, and he's more of a guard. I think in NFL puts him a guard and he's fine.
What about corners? Because the Panthers have 0 corners.
Oh, there's some good corners. Bryce Hall. Likes watching what he did.
That's where everybody wants right now on Panther Twitter is for them to trade up.
You guys need an outside corner or a slot?
Hall's an outside corner. Amik Robertson's more of that slot guy. Troy Pride's an outside corner. Like there's some solid guys available.
We need any type of corner, to be honest. If you think about it, this is the Panthers' current roster is Dante Jackson.
Toast.
Well, he's boomer bust, man. He's exciting player. It's just, boomer bust. And that's it. We have Corn Elder. If you guys remember old Corn Elder.
Yeah.
And that's it. Like, because Bradbury left. Bradbury was very good. It's just, you don't want to pay him but so much when you don't have a limited amount of money. So no, we need a secondary. We needed an entire defense. In fact, that's why the Panthers I could see the Panthers going all defense this whole draft, which is crazy. And if you think about long-term team building, if you're that, what does that mean you got to do next year? Does that mean you got to go all off? It's just crazy to think that you're so desperate that you in that position that you have to use all that collateral on defense. But we need to.
I mean, I hate to say it, but the Falcons going 5 out of 6 on defense wouldn't shock me for this year's draft. They don't really need a running back. I know a lot of people want them to draft one, but running backs have 4-year lifespans. They've got Todd Gurley right now. They've got Brian Hill. Next year, take a running back in the 3rd or the 4th and be happy with it and just be done with it. Running backs are the cheapest resource. So why take one now when he's just going to sit on the bench or maybe even be cut? I'd rather see them take a wide receiver who could be a kick returner. I'd rather see them take another corner who could be a kick returner because they could use depth there. But Atlanta taking a linebacker is pretty much a given. Atlanta taking a defensive end is very, very possible. And maybe even going with the safety for a backup behind Keanu Neal.
What's going on with y'all's secondary these days? I know. All right, so this I think the Terrell, right? Isn't that the pick day one?
Terrell out of Clemson.
All right, I think it's going to be better pick than draft people think at this moment. You know what I'm saying? Because we all get so hung up on he's a 7. He should have gone 17 instead of 14 or whatever it is, right? You guys had
in that 30 to 40 range, and he went 16. To me, I'm like, I don't love the value, but I love the fit. And I think that's more important, is the fit.
Well, and then what happens if you wait to 30 or 40? What type of player do you get then? The drop-off, everybody told us the drop-off was steep in the cornerback class when you went from Okudah to Henderson. They said it was a steep drop-off. And if that's what you need, you better get the guy right away. That is the next player, the next best player. And I think too, isn't he the guy that got kind of just ran up against Jerry Jeudy against Alabama a couple of times or something like that? As overall, he's a really good player. He just had national championship.
He did a good job against Jeudy and then Ruggs and those guys. His issue was that when he went against Jamar Chase, who's probably the best all-around wide receiver prospect since the Julio Jones, AJ Green year, like Jamar Chase is going to go top 3 in 2021. That dude is just a beast. And LSU had him. He was like having a Julio Jones 2 years into being a pro out there on the field. You couldn't do anything about it. The dude was just a monster. So
sometimes you just get beat on that Saturday. You know, I mean, I don't think that tells you what your career is going to be. So I think that is a pick that was both need and not BPA, but best player of a group that you guys needed.
Yeah. Well, and the thing that I was looking at with him was, AJ Terrell may not be as good as Darrelle Revis or one of those guys, but if he can be Darius Slay, if he can be AJ Boye, if he can be, there's a lot of good corners in the NFL that just aren't spectacular. They're not like top 3 players in the league, but if he could be equivalent to one of those guys, he doesn't have to be, the beastly number 1 guy that, say, Byron Jones is, but if he can be a solid enough player, I'm not worried about it. He's not going to be Patrick Peterson or, Richard Sherman anytime soon, but if he could be, I don't know, not Isaiah Oliver, he's better than him. If he could basically be what Trufant was last year without missing games, the Falcons already upgraded. And I think he could be close.
I think, AJ Terrell, when people talk about, the value or whatever, he was the Raiders wanted him at 19. So he wasn't getting out of the top 20. And then when you look at him in comparison to the other corners, there were other players that I liked more than AJ Terrell, but when you sort of are looking at the position when you look at the best corners in the NFL, the vast majority of them are high-level athletes. And after Okudah, after Henderson, AJ Terrell was probably the best athlete among the top corners in this draft class. So from a team building and evaluation standpoint, you kind of have to look at AJ Terrell, whether you personally would rank him that high, as probably the 3rd best cornerback in this draft class, at least in terms of projecting his potential to the next level. So the Falcons taking him as the 3rd best corner in this draft class, where they take him, is not a bad pick in the slightest way. So, I think people can certainly nitpick and say I preferred 2 other corners. I thought Christian Fulton and Jeff Gladney were, they were better players than AJ Terrell was, but
I thought Diggs was better, but I would have had Terrell 4th.
But I'm not going to sit here and be like, I knew the Falcons weren't going to take Fulton. Even if I liked him better, doesn't matter. He wasn't going to be a Falcon. And so it was basically did I have a strong enough feeling that Jeff Gladney was so much better than AJ Terrell that I would be like, oh, this is a terrible pick and they should have traded back and gotten Gladney. Like, no. Like if I thought Gladney was better, it was marginally better. So it was one of those things where, people are going to be critical of the pick, but I think it's a solid pick for where they are, where they were picking in the draft. I think he's going to have a solid career. Is he going to be a superstar NFL corner? Probably not, but is he going to be a competent number one corner? Absolutely. And I feel a lot better about the Falcons secondary with AJ Terrell in it than I did going into the draft. So I think the Falcons definitely got someone they can be a reliable cover guy and at least give them a chance against all these ridiculously good wide receivers in the NFC South.
What was throwing you off of Fulton? Because I was not liking Fulton either.
No, I like Fulton. He was like my second favorite corner in this draft class.
But what was throwing you off of the Falcons drafting him?
Oh, well, he just didn't have the length. He's got like short arms, and the Falcons hate corners with short arms.
Okay, because I didn't get it. I thought he was too flat-footed when he was in coverage, and I think that was just one of the things that I didn't like.
I love Fulton. I thought he's got a high level skill set. I think his confidence is high. Who wound up picking him? Was it Minnesota?
I don't know. Let's see.
It was in round 2. It was at the end of round 2.
Tennessee. The Tips.
Tennessee. Okay, yeah. He'll be an interesting fit there. They don't really need an outside corner, but I guess they can move Adoree Jackson inside.
I heard
Malcolm Butler's a hot corner, man.
I heard the Vikings had 13 picks today.
Three picks in round 4, 3 picks in round 5, 3 picks in round 6, and 4 picks in round 7.
And if I'm the Falcons, I go up and say, you know what? You want 136? Give me a 5th, a 6th, and a 7th, and those 2 7s at the end of the draft. And come get your guy. And if I'm the Vikings, I look at it and go, yeah, I've already made 4 picks. Let's make 9 more, and I'll still have a ton. Like, it's worth it. I'll trade up. I'll get my guy in the 4th.
Really not good when you add that many rookies to a team. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's like kind of like when you come with more than 8 people.
I'm very curious if they actually used all 13 of those picks or if they start.
There's no way. There's
zero
way.
Because I don't see 13 openings on their roster, and they still drafted a bunch of guys yesterday. So, and a bunch of guys the day before. Like, they
trade 2 picks for each round for a better pick in that round.
Yeah.
They need 2 safeties. They could use another edge.
They need 1 safety.
No, they only have 2 safeties on their roster. They need 2.
You're saying depth guys.
Yeah, depth guys.
It's depth day, so you're right. They need 2 safeties. They need
an edge.
A corner. They need an edge.
They could probably use another offensive lineman. They could probably use another wide receiver.
They could use like 7 picks and still have 11 total rookies, and then still trade away 6 of them to get their guys.
I don't know if they have 13 holes. You're right.
4 more rookies because Atlanta has probably 6 roster spots they need to fill right now, and they have 3 picks. So if you trade one down, you get 3 more picks.
They should have been using even more of those picks to leverage.
Linebacker, you need more depth at corner. You need more depth at receiver. You need that return guy. You need more depth on the O line. I mean,
we got breaking news, guys. Trent Williams is just being traded to the 49ers.
Wow, finally. By the way, the 49ers, Lynch doing an incredible job out there, isn't he?
Yeah.
I mean,
I don't know.
You're not going to get Falcon fans being praising of the 49ers, I think, for obvious reasons.
I think it's because
Why are you hating on the – like, what do y'all got against 49ers?
I don't have anything against the 49ers, but I know a lot of Falcon fans have a lot of issues with the 49ers.
Long-time Falcons fans have always hated the 49ers because it's the old NFC West rivalry.
Right. Did you guys used to be in the division with them?
Yeah. So, like, you were in there too, but it made no sense.
I don't understand it. It was like when I was a child, kind of.
It was like New Orleans, Atlanta, Carolina, and then all the way out west, San Francisco and St. Louis. Made no damn sense. Now at least the division makes sense geographically. It's like New Orleans, Atlanta, Carolina, and then our D cousin Tampa Bay, who's like finally trying to do something.
I wonder if this COVID mess is going to make us reconsider shaking up divisions and conferences a little one day. I mean, I know in college they're going to start thinking about it for travel. It's not that necessary in the pros, but
I feel like in the pros it's pretty geographically set. Like if you look at all the divisions,
our division is pretty tight geographically. I think. Is New Orleans is the farthest away?
Well, if you look at a map,
from Atlanta,
Atlanta's the center of the division geographically, but damn, Davis Gaither just won. Atlanta's the center of the division geographically. We're about 400 miles from New Orleans, about 200 miles from Carolina, and about 300 miles or so from Tampa Bay. But even Carolina to New Orleans, which is like the farthest distance, isn't that big of a distance.
But you do have to go through Mississippi to get there, so that's a big challenge.
Yeah, but who wants to live in Mississippi?
That's what I'm saying. Like it's Mississippi's in the way. So
I mean, not trying. Like Biloxi is great, but like the rest of Mississippi kind of sucks, from my understanding. It seems like it's more backwards than Alabama.
I've heard the same thing about Mississippi. Is like if you driving down the banks of the Mississippi, like it's just poor. It looks like 1880. Like nothing has changed. It's like a time capsule. But I gotta say, if you're more backwards than Alabama, that is an accomplishment in its own right.
I work with a lot of people from Alabama, and I will have to agree with that.
I've only been there once, man, and I tell you this is that when we were there, I mean, I was on my way to New Orleans. We stopped for a night, and I teach history, so I want to go. I like to just quickly. I drag my family really quickly into these places just so I can see them. And we went into the Capitol, the State House building, and you got that giant portrait celebrating George Wallace. But then, like, I got a damn trip around trying to find the Montgomery bus boycott marker. He's like, where is this thing? Why is it so hard to find? But George Wallace is over there.
I know a lot of fine people from Alabama. I don't know any fine people from Mississippi. So.
That's kind of my issue too. I know a lot of really nice people from Alabama, but Mississippi's kind of
the slowest sentence ever.
Yeah, Tony, I was wondering if I think it's Scott's internet connection. The
people in Biloxi that I met that were working at the casinos, like those people were cool as hell, but I don't know. I went to the bar and it was a Saints bar, and I think Tony and Aaron, I'm sorry for.
It's like every other syllable I hear from Scott.
Are you getting hello?
It's like you drop it.
Yeah, you might want to drop out and come back.
I think you're cut.
and he's like, these guys is connection. That's what he. All right, Aaron, what are your thoughts on the draft surprises? Anything?
Anyway, if you guys didn't hear it the first time, fuck the Saints.
Classic.
There you go.
Surprises.
Get that one clear.
Draft to you, Aaron, so far. Like, what's
overall
your
draft?
Yeah, what's your storylines about this stuff?
Trying to think. What was I thinking last night? I don't know. I'm operating on so little sleep that like I can't tie together themes from day to day.
Jalen Hurts to the Eagles.
Yeah, that was a surprise.
Jalen Hurts to the Eagles. That was kind of weird.
I like that because Carson Wentz is injured. You know, a lot of concerns with his health, and they've got a lot invested in that team. They don't need to just be derailed entirely by losing a quarterback. And you put Jalen Hurts out there, he's athletic. You know what I'm saying? You can do a lot of different things with Doug Peterson's offense. So I think that's a pretty darn good fit.
Yeah. Sorry,
I
I was
think
just paying attention to the picks.
see, there's Sadiq Charles. That was one of those offensive linemen I was telling you about from LSU. Dude's a
Yeah.
solid player. He played left tackle, but dude's a guard.
Well, he's going to replace
He's a
Trent
guard.
Williams.
I mean,
You don't really have to replace Trent Williams because you didn't have him. Like, he hasn't played, you know what I'm saying? So it's like you're just kind of adding to the roster. The Trent Williams story is so bizarre.
I think it's more that he's replacing Wes Schweitzer as the starting left guard there, who they just signed from Atlanta, because Wes Schweitzer should not start at guard in the NFL. He's best as that 3-tiered backup behind left guard, right guard, and center.
Scott, I'm not going to stand for this Wes Schweitzer slander. He's going to Washington. Tony, who's the former Panthers offensive line coach that they now have in Washington?
Matsko.
Yeah, and Matsko does a good job developing guards. He did Andrew Norwell. He did Van Roten. He did Trey Turner. So Schweitzer's going to blossom in Washington, unlike he did in Atlanta. Pretty much every offensive lineman that leaves Atlanta goes on to blossom elsewhere because the Falcons' offensive line coach is terrible. And, I will not stand for this Wes Schweitzer slander.
While I agree Chris Morgan is pretty terrible, I don't think that's true where every Falcons offensive lineman that leaves Atlanta ends up being great. Did Peter Cons even get signed by anybody else?
Okay. Well, I'm talking about every offensive touche. Every offensive lineman that has left Atlanta since 2015, I will say.
Okay, so that's what Mike Person, who went to Kyle Shanahan, who gets everything he can out of an offensive lineman.
Mm-hmm.
Ben Garland, who was good here and good there. Where is this guy that's blossoming? Where are these talents that are blossoming?
Your
run skill, Mike Person
line has underperformed.
Ben Garland, James Stone, the superstar center,
who went to Tennessee and started for a year and then got benched halfway through the season. Yeah,
Jamil Douglas,
who was average in Jacksonville and a placeholder for like 4 games.
There's somebody else I'm missing. But pretty much everybody that was a backup here in Atlanta went on to be a functional starter elsewhere.
For like 4 games, and then they got benched.
Well, it's 4 more games than they played here in Atlanta.
Okay. They still sucked. It's not like these guys were like bad in Atlanta, and then they were these all-stars elsewhere. They were bad in Atlanta and at best average elsewhere.
I would disagree with that point.
Go ahead, Tony.
Someone's got to remind Scott that the Falcons line is still sucked.
I think the Falcons line is a lot better when you have Chris Lindstrom in there playing right guard and he's healthy. Because I remember them kind of dominating the Panthers in both games.
Don't use the Panthers as a metric on this. We don't got to worry about that. My point is that the Falcons' offensive line has been a weakness for them for a long time, and despite them trying to address it, it's only marginally improved.
I think it'll be better this year.
It's gotten better over the past couple of years, but it's not
it'll be much better this year.
Strength.
You've got 2 Pro Bowlers. You've got Jake Matthews. You've got Alex Mack. But then you've got Chris Lindstrom, if he's fully healthy all year, and Caleb McGarry's fully healthy through training camp and doesn't have a heart ablation that makes him miss training camp. I think you'll see those 2 take a ton of strides, and at least the right side of the line will be back to where it was back in, say, 2010, which was, I would argue, the last time the line was, like, exceptional. And then at left tackle, you've got that set. Left guard ends up being your only real hole, and hopefully Matt Hennessy comes right in and is at least average. He can't be any worse than James Carpenter or Jamon Brown as a pass blocker. I don't even think that's possible.
Well, I'll cut in on this argument. Adnan, man, what's up?
Hey, guys. How are y'all doing?
You jumped in the middle of Tony and Scott going at it about offensive line play. So welcome to the show, my friend.
It was riveting.
I do love offensive line talk.
So, Adam, curious to get your thoughts on the Falcons draft so far.
I'm enjoying it. The AJ Terrell pick, a lot of people thought of it as a reach. And I mean, I understand it, but he's the guy that Dan Quinn really wanted. He's the guy that they were really looking at. The Oakland Raiders would have taken him at 19, so a trade back was out of the question. There was talks that the Eagles could have were looking to trade up for CD Lamb, but I don't think they gave enough for the trade up. But then day two, I loved what they did yesterday, completely addressing the trenches on both sides. On defense, getting Marlon Davidson, who was a little bit overshadowed by Derek Brown in Auburn, but he was fantastic at Auburn, first team All SEC on the defensive line. Then you get a guy in Matt Hennessy, who many people thought that the Falcons could be targeting him in the second round. And Matt Hennessy is going to be your center of the future. You've completely addressed the offensive line at this point. I don't think there's any more holes in the offensive line. Hopefully McGarry and Lindstrom can improve into next year. Hopefully Lindstrom can stay healthy. I have no doubt that he's a future Pro Bowler. McGarry, I hope he takes the next step. But the Atlanta Falcons O-line should be one of the best young O-lines in the game. And with Alex Mack getting up there in age, we just need another year of service from him, and then Matt Hennessy can step into that role. But I'm really liking what the Falcons have done. If they can just come away with a solid linebacker on day three right now, it'll be a home run of a draft for me. And I trust Dan Quinn's ability to pick out those late round gems. He's done it multiple times with Devondre Campbell, Devontae Casey, Grady Jarrett, Kendall Sheffield last year. And if you want to go all the way into the offense as well, Russell Gage was a 6th rounder. Foye Oluokun, who's going to be a starting linebacker, was a 6th rounder. So I trust in his ability to find maybe a starter in this 4th round, an eventual starter.
I agree with that.
I'll agree with that. There are a lot of good players left. I think it's funny how a lot of people were talking about the Falcons doing a running back in the first 2 days, but I just don't see them even taking one at all in this entire draft. So I think it'll be interesting if they do end up getting a running back, if he's more of a, as Aaron was putting it, a true return specialist more than a running back.
Yeah, Adnan, where'd you stand on the whole adding a sort of a number 2 to the Todd Gurley signing?
I wasn't in favor of it on day 2 just because the defense had so many holes you had to address. Getting a defensive tackle was more important than getting a number 2 running back behind Todd Gurley. Getting a linebacker is more important. Getting a cornerback was more important than getting a running back. If this team was more full, if it had less holes like it had in, say, 2016, then you can make that type of luxury pick. And we saw them make that luxury pick in the 2018 draft, and they took Calvin Ridley in the 1st round. They could afford to go BPA just because there weren't as many holes on the roster. But now you have to plug in those holes a little bit before you can look at a position like running back, at least with one of those premium picks.
No, I hear that. Yeah, I mean, if they had still kept that Hayden Hurst 2nd rounder, they probably could have been a little bit more able to maybe use a luxury pick on a best player available, maybe in round 3 or something like that. Would you agree with that?
I agree with it, but then you'd have a big hole at tight end.
Yeah,
and
I mean, obviously you would have to fill the hole at tight end at some point, maybe get a free agent or something like that. But
well, let's say that they had signed Tyler Eifert to that prove it deal for, say, $2-3 million, whatever the Jacksonville Jaguars signed him to. Would that have been enough for you to say, well, tight end filled for now?
That's hard to say because when Tyler Eifert is healthy, he's very serviceable as a tight end. We saw him. He was a Pro Bowler at Cincinnati a few years ago, caught 12 touchdown passes in I think it was the 2016 season. But Tyler Eifert has had so many injuries over the past few years, and I understand Todd Gurley. Todd Gurley has his own injury risks, but I think Todd Gurley is someone who will manage to play out the entire year if you keep him on a bit of a snap count, he's not going to be a bell cow running back at all. He's not going to be the Todd Gurley of 2017 anymore. But we saw him, he was productive with the Rams last year behind a terrible offensive line. Running wise, they were the 26th offensive line in terms of PFF's run blocking score. The Falcons were, I think like 13th in comparison. But I think Tyler Eifert would have been less likely to stay healthy than Todd Gurley. So I would not have gone into the season comfortable with Tyler Eifert as your starting tight end, and you're relying on him.
So for me, I guess I'm not too worried about the running back behind Gurley, because I think you're going to see Gurley get, we'll say, 200 carries, which is probably the least he'll see in any single season that he's played. And you'll see, because that's about what Freeman was on pace for if you put a 16-game pace on. And then you'll give Brian Hill 85 carries, and then you'll give Ito Smith 55, 60 carries, and then Allison will get 30 carries. And even that's probably more carries than what they'll actually see, but as a unit. But if you take all that, where does a rookie come in and see running and actually see time running the ball? Or should they just go with a returner who happens to play running back?
I think if they had drafted one of those second day running backs, that guy would have definitely come in and leapfrog, pretty much every other running back on the team other than Gurley. So he would have definitely came in. Like they drafted a Cam Akers or a J.K. Dobbins, that guy would have definitely gotten playing time. But,
I agree.
Tony, Panthers are on the clock. The pick is in. Who are you hoping to have the team pick?
It's positional at this point for me. I don't know enough of the names, and at this point of the draft to give you a guy. But is Hall still out there?
Yeah, the pick is actually. Twitter has the pick. You want to know it?
Go ahead.
Troy Pride, the cornerback from UCLA.
Okay. Well, we needed a corner.
Or Notre Dame. Notre Dame. I'm sorry.
Notre Dame. We needed a corner. So yeah. Again, another defensive pick. 4 in a row. 5.
Yeah. Rebuild. Defensive rebuild.
I think you guys don't sleep on Todd Gurley. I know that you guys are trying to be cautiously optimistic about Todd Gurley, but I don't think we should just look at Todd Gurley as broken. All right. I mean, the narrative of Todd Gurley and the reality of Todd Gurley may be a little different.
He's broken, but
well, first of all, when we think of this injury history, I mean, he does have an injury history going all the way back to college, right? But he has come back successfully from a lot of that. But the real Todd Gurley injury stuff started where people thought he isn't the player anymore when the Rams didn't use him correctly in the Super Bowl. So it wasn't even about health entirely. Is that Sean McVay came out and said that he did not go to Gurley like he should have. Last year, Todd Gurley single-handedly beat the Panthers in the second half. I mean, just muscled them. So I think that, like you guys said, is that if you don't have the expectation of him being a 300 carry guy, all of a sudden you might get a lot more out of him than people expect. I just know that Todd Gurley played high school football down the road from us. So I would always want that dude on my team.
Hey, Matt, what's going on, man?
What's going on, guys? How you doing?
Oh, I've always liked Todd Gurley. Hey, Matt, why do you look like Tampa?
What's that? Checking out the quarantine beard?
What's with the Tommaso Ciampa look? Tommaso Ciampa.
I have no idea who that is.
Well, not just the quarantine beard. You look like Tommaso Ciampa.
We don't know who that is.
Yeah, I have no idea who that is, Scott. I'm going with my best
watch
Ben
NXT.
I've been tuning out of WWE for the last several years. It's gone down the tubes.
And you should watch Tommaso Ciampa. Dude's a beast.
All right, I'll make sure I
Let's spin today, get nostalgic on older wrestling.
Yeah.
Rather than the draft.
So what's going on, guys? What do we think of this Falcons draft class thus far? I'm sure you talked about it some, but I mean.
Yeah, Adnan just laid out. He loves it. He loved the day 2.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like it so far. I mean, I wish they had more picks, but it is what it is.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see if
Oh
Mitchell
my God.
wants to trade down. I think this is a prime opportunity, having 2 4th-round picks. But that's not really his MO. So, he said to the reporters, the media last night that they're pretty focused on what they want to do. So I'm curious what that's going to be. I would expect a linebacker here.
I say trade 136 for a 5th, a 6th, and those 2 7ths right at the end of the draft from the Vikings. That's what I said.
In my mock draft, I definitely thought that they should trade that 2nd, 4th for a 5th and a 6th. I mean, there's some good talent still. I kind of underestimated how deep this class is. So I'd certainly be in favor of something like that. But yeah, I mean, getting Hennessy in that 3rd round pick, I mean, I thought they were going to have to use that 2nd round to get him. So to get him in that 3rd round pick, I thought that was awesome. A guy that they probably had as their top rated center on their board. Now you got the future, I think, somewhat secure behind Alex Mack. And then, I'm really, that Marlon Davidson pick is growing on me by the minute. I mean, guy's going to add attitude to that defense.
Here's a thought. If Bryce Hall is there at 116 or 119, if he's there at 119, do you take him for additional depth at cornerback?
I mean, probably not. I
want at that point.
No, I'm a big Bryce Hall fan, but I just, one, I don't see it happening, and 2, again, if anything, I think they should add a nickel cornerback. Amick Robertson, I think, would be a great pick.
I think Sheffield's that guy right now.
But Sheffield can also be the outside guy, so that's why I think you have so many outside guys. You don't really have enough nickel cornerbacks, in my opinion, especially since they made the decision to keep Casey at safety. Your backup nickel cornerback, if not, after Sheffield, probably Chris Cooper. Does anybody disagree with that? I mean,
probably about right.
So I think this is the point in the draft where if you're going to take another corner, which I don't know if they're going to do, but if you're going to take another corner, I think it's going to be a nickel corner. I mean, Darnay Holmes just went off the board. He would have been a nice pick, add some return ability as well. Because right now Brandon Powell, I guess, is that surprised me when they said he's the leader in the clubhouse there. So I think if they're going to take another corner, as much as I, again, like Bryce Hall, I think it would be a nickel guy.
No, I think that's fair. I didn't love Chris Cooper at nickel corner last summer.
Yeah, I think I'd like him better at safety myself too.
I don't know why Dan Quinn was going goo goo gaga over what he was getting torched in the preseason. So I didn't get that, but
right.
We'll see how it goes.
Who did Carolina had the pick? I see we got Tony in here. Who did Carolina go with just now?
Tony Pride. What was his name? Tony Pride Jr. Is that right?
Okay.
Troy Pride. Yeah.
Troy Pride. What people are pointing out on Twitter is that, one, finally we have not gotten selected a guy from Temple Baylor. You know what I mean? Like all of our offseason moves have been so incestuous to the Matt Rule legacy, right? But we've stayed away from that in the draft, so that's kind of cool because you're worried about him overplaying that. But it seems like we're really working on building a very fast defense, and this guy runs a 4.4, right? And so big and fast athletes. This kind of fits, I think, what the template for Matt Rule is trying to apply.
I thought getting Jeremy Chin in round 2, because there was a lot of connection with Isaiah Simmons being the athlete that he is in round 1. They opted to go with Brown. I thought getting Jeremy Chin in round 2 kind of offsets passing on Simmons. And Chin's, I think, position's more defined. I mean, being a strong safety, I think, I'd say if in the early going, that would be my favorite pick that they've made thus far.
Really? Wow. Yeah, a lot of people have been excited about that. Tell me, because he's from the smaller school, right?
Right. Yeah, he's from Southern Illinois. But 99 percentile athlete. I mean, that's going to translate. So
big, fast, and violent.
yeah, a Cam
player.
Chancellor type of player, you might have on your hands. I mean, you don't want to get ahead of yourself, but yeah, I like that pick a lot for them. And they had a trade up to get him, right?
Yeah.
I mean that's worth that move.
What are your thoughts on Derek Brown over Isaiah Simmons in the first round? I don't know if you guys talked about it, but I wasn't here.
No, we didn't talk a ton about that specifically. I like Brown a lot. I think that we can overanalyze things so much to where it's going to push out of like defensive tackles. You know, all of a sudden, are they worth this spot or whatever? Derek Brown is a big boy. He's a top 5 player kind of before, you know, the combine hype hits. Everything is that if we would have had this discussion in January, we would have put Derek Brown at the top of our list, right? So I like that. It was a need so much. And this is not a popular opinion, and I'm not qualified enough as a evaluator of talent to hold it strongly. But to me, I have some concern that maybe we are a little too infatuated with Isaiah Simmons, like just big, fat, you know, all of these
I'm kind of with you, Tony. I mean, I know a lot of Falcons fans were like, that was one of the targets when all this smoke was out there about Falcons trading up and being aggressive, that everyone seemed to want Isaiah Simmons. But for what the Falcons do, I mean, I think Isaiah Simmons needs to go to a spot with a creative defensive coordinator that has a plan for him. Because if you just go, like right now, he doesn't. That's why I brought up with Jeremy Chin. He has a defined position. I don't know necessarily what Isaiah Simmons is going to be. Is he going to be a linebacker? Is he going to be a safety? Is he going to be?
Use him like Derek Brooks, a weak side linebacker. You got Raheem Morris here.
But is he as physical as Derek Brooks is?
No,
I would say so. I don't think he's as good of a block shedder as Derek Brooks, but that's something I feel you can teach.
I mean, that's important.
Well,
I think Isaiah Simmons is a little bit overrated.
Yeah. And that's what I'm saying, is that I think there's a lot of questions too surrounding his athleticism. Like what you said, is like there are benefits to being a positionless player because you can be very versatile and you can put them, and he can look, he's got the speed and the ability to go out into coverage, right? He's got the size to rush the passer, right? I mean, he's got a lot of these tools. But the question is, too, is that how does that work in complement to what you already have, number one?
Right.
And so I think that you did raise a good point, is the Panthers don't have a strong safety. So having a guy in there that you're saying, this is what we want you to be and see you being, has some value of its own. The one thing, too, is that Isaiah Simmons is very fast, right? And that's why we love him so much. But sometimes when you play that like kind of linebacker position, even if it's outside, pick any of the linebacker positions, it's not even just about the 40 speed, but kind of decisiveness. And, and one thing I noticed with Luke Kuechly is that he was never just, so fast. He was fast, but he was he was mentally fast. Like he knew where he was going. And some of the highlights I've looked at Simmons, he looks like he's waiting to see what's going to happen rather than just using that speed instantly.
I saw some things on Twitter. Do you buy that story about Panthers choosing Derek Brown over Simmons because of Kuechly, retiring, and they don't want Simmons to have to live up to that, insane potential?
I don't know. I think that's kind of trying to read the tea leaves a bit. I do think that from what I've heard is that the Panthers, I won't say weren't interested in Isaiah Simmons, but there's not a ton of evidence linking us to him in the first place before the draft. There's pictures of our GM at Derek Brown's pro day, just shit-eating grin on his face. We just didn't have the evidence that they had met a lot with Isaiah Simmons. The other thing that I heard is that the Panthers with Isaiah
are on the clock, by the way, guys.
Yeah.
The other The other tip that I heard about this last point is I heard the Panthers were interested in trading out of 7, but that when Derek Brown was still there, which they did not think he would be, that they could not pass on that.
Yeah, it makes sense. I know the Cardinals certainly were a rumored landing spot if Derek did land to 8. So
I like Simmons in Arizona. I think that's a good fit for him. That's a good landing spot for him because they need him playing in that division with George Kittle, and their tight end coverage was the worst in the league last year. And Devondre Campbell's a step in the right direction, but he's not going to solve that problem. So he's a great fit there. And he's going to play with Buddha, and they have already interchangeable pieces on their secondary, so they can kind of move him around.
Yeah.
If it was me, if I'm Carolina, I would have taken Derek Brown over Isaiah Simmons just because, I like Isaiah Simmons. You can certainly argue that he's a better overall prospect than Derek Brown, but when it comes to team building, and when you're Carolina and you're starting over and you're rebuilding your defense,
the worst run defense in football last year.
Yeah, yes.
I think Derek Brown's a good foundational piece that you can continue to build over that, because it's not like Carolina was going to draft a guy overnight that's going to solve their defensive problems. So when you're projecting it out from a 3-year sort of model of what you want to do, rebuilding your defense, starting with the foundation on your defensive line, getting that type of dude in the middle of your line, I think makes a lot of sense. So I'm definitely in favor of what Carolina did with that pick, even if necessarily Derek Brown doesn't turn into, an Ndamukong Suh type of player.
Or Fletcher Cox.
I would say look at Akeem Hicks. Look at Akeem Hicks from 2016 through 2018. Look at his numbers. Tell me you wouldn't want that, because I think that's Derek Brown and what his ceiling and, I don't know, maybe even floor almost. I think he's definitely going to hit that point. And, I think, Aaron, you agreed with this and said this on Twitter, but just throughout the process, I think Derek Brown just got underrated the further we went through this. And I don't know why necessarily. You just turn on the tape. I watched him a while back and I was like, all right, I know what type of freak show he is. I know what type of player he is. I don't really need to see anymore. At the combine, everyone kind of bombed the combine for the most part due to, changing the time slot and having it at night, and just that killed everyone's times.
That was the weirdest thing I've ever seen with the combine, having it at night. Is the worst.
No one really did well and helped their stock. There was a handful of players, maybe you can count them on one hand. Oh man, my guy.
Who do we
Michael
get?
Walker.
Okay.
Oh, love the pick.
Michael Walker, okay.
Versatile linebacker right there. Fred Warner vibes a little bit.
Yeah, I didn't watch Walker, but I knew he was definitely a Falcons type of player.
Oh, man.
He's fast.
Yeah, he ran good.
I had no thoughts on it. So I didn't watch him.
He's fast. For a strong side linebacker.
He played Sam in 2018 and he played Mike at 2019. So, again, he can play all 3 spots.
But they're drafting him to be a Sam. He's basically like,
I don't know. I think he's
Campbell Redux.
Perhaps. We'll see. I just think it's going to be, one of my biggest question marks with what the Falcons are going to do on defense is, are they going to go back to the traditional 4-3 under, or are we going to see more of that bare front 3-4? Because if we see more of the bare front, you only need 2 inside backers. Then you have Tack and Dante playing the outside. So I just think this is competition for Foy for the most part. The Sam linebacker is not a position that garners a lot of snaps anymore.
Yeah. I have no thoughts, guys. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry. I'm just excited about this pick. I didn't necessarily see it coming, but man, I'm glad it did. Another one of my guys. So that's Hennessy and
was that someone that you had predicted ahead of time?
Yeah, I've been on him for start of the draft. I credit Tony Pauline. He's the one that put him on my radar for me back during the college season, and it was nice to see him test well. One of the few people that, didn't hurt himself. But yeah, I just wasn't sure the Falcons would be into him for whatever reason. That's awesome. So there's your linebacker. five of my goals for this draft was to provide competition for Oliver and Sheffield. I think they did more than that by getting AJ Terrell, who again you can say all that you want that it's
Probably
a reach.
starting at left corner.
Yeah, I mean, you could say what you want that it was a reach. I mean, we should come to expect the Falcons when they see their guy, they're going to take him. But knowing what's come out about the Raiders would have taken him at pick 19. So it really wasn't a reach. This was Chris Lindstrom to the Vikings part 2, with when the Vikings said that they wanted Chris Lindstrom and Falcons took him at 14. So they got their guy, athletic, scheme fit, good character. Another one of the things I wanted to see them do was add a pass rusher. I think I would classify Marlon Davidson as an interior pass rusher.
Agreed.
I was surprised by that pick because Marlon wasn't really on my radar. I thought Matt Abuke or Ross Blacklock, who ended up going a couple picks before, would have been their guy. But after doing some homework then last night on Davidson, I mean, you can definitely see his background as a defensive end in high school. Obviously, that's I think part of the reason why they wanted to get their best players on the field, and they had him stand up at edge because they had no other guys. And his ability to corner and to get that half man position on his blocker is pretty impressive. So I'm excited to see that on the interior next to Grady Jarrett. So got another pass rusher. Another thing was getting the future behind Alex Mack. They did that with Hennessy, and then getting a linebacker to provide competition with Foy was my fourth one. Now my last one, and I don't know if they're going to do this, but I want them to take advantage of this wide receiver class. The pickings are a bit slim now, but there's a couple burners, couple guys with return ability. So we'll see if they look at that in round 4. I don't know what your guys' thoughts are and what you'd want to see them do, or I feel like a running back might be coming.
And pick up 6 and 7.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you on there. I want a couple more picks. I think there's some players here, because if they could turn that 4th into a 5th and 6th and get a running back like Anthony McFarland Jr., I think that would be awesome. Then maybe get one of those burners at receiver, and then take best player available, I guess, in round 7.
What's up with Auburn defensive linemen and D tackles having single digit numbers?
They've always done that.
Really? 5 and
Yeah,
and then speaking of Marlon Davidson, have you guys seen this GIF that's flying around on Twitter right now of him chasing down this guy like 60 yards down?
Russell Gage, who's one of our receivers.
He's our
I
third
tweeted
receiver.
that out. He's just a freakazoid, man. He's just a freakazoid. Marlon Davidson, I think that's the best way to describe him. If Derek Brown didn't exist, I'm wondering if we're talking about Marlon Davidson and similar thoughts as Derek Brown. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Marlon Davidson had more pressures than Brown. Now, I know Brown's been billed as more of the run stuffer. He can push the pocket and he can, he has some slipperiness, but
Matt, it's different roles though. I mean, you had one guy who was,
but you have a 300-pounder going against left tackles. Like and he's still getting pressures.
He was basically a 5 tech going up against these left tackles. He wasn't like,
well, at times, but he was also standing up and playing like a 7 tech. And
but when you've got that guy going in against these left tackles compared to a guy playing at the 1 tech, like Derek Brown was every time, you're not going to get as many pressures from your 1 tech like that. That's all it is.
Well, we don't, you really don't know how, like, what if they didn't have each other? As obviously you would think that they benefited from each other's presence, right?
Yeah, I mean, he got a lot of one-on-one matchups.
Yeah, I mean,
Scott has a point there.
I think the numbers are Brown had 35 pressures, Davidson had 43. So I guess you factor in sort of where they're playing; those are about equal, right?
I just think it's super impressive for like a 300-pound man to be doing that to left tackles. I mean, again, Aaron, what's your projection for him as far as transitioning more inside as like a 3 tech and stuff? I mean, do you think he's going to be able to have similar success There,
Yeah, I mean, it depends. Like, I think right away he's more of a pass rushing guy inside.
yeah,
The few times I saw him line up inside against the run, he didn't really do much. He was getting swallowed up by double teams and whatnot. I don't think he's a guy that's going to necessarily be the type of dude that you're going to want to anchor there. So as far as him getting serious run on the interior in their base defense, I think that's going to be primarily Tyler Davison. And it's going to be so weird saying Davison. People are like, which Davison are you talking about? So I guess we got to start calling him Marlon. Marlon will probably just basically be their go-to sub-package guy at D tackle beside Grady Jarrett. I like his potential. I think he can come in and hit the ground running pretty quickly there just because of his speed, his burst, his hand usage, his power and whatnot. So I think he can be an impactful guy right there. And then you just kind of develop him a little bit more over time, and maybe he can be more of that 3-down type of guy. But yeah, that's basically the Cliff Notes version.
So you think he's going to be the first man up probably in nickel next to Grady?
Yeah, I would assume so.
Yeah.
And that's a heck of a tandem right there, man.
Yeah, we've been wanting a partner in crime for Grady Jarrett for a while, and I think they finally might have found it.
The defense, going back to Derek Brown just a little bit, is that, it's so hard to quantify how important that is to a defense. It's like Aaron was speaking earlier about building a defense in the long term versus Derek Brown versus Isaiah Simmons. But, like the Panthers double dipped in 2012 at defensive tackle with Star Lotulelei and KK Short. And it really transformed our team very quickly. And despite me, kind of, and I think I was a sucker for this a little bit, is I just underappreciated Star Lotulelei while he was here and what he did for the defense, because it always didn't translate onto the stat sheet and pressures and sacks and things. But when he left, we really felt it, immediately. So not the sexiest position, right, to draft.
Yeah.
For excitement value, but probably far more important than we give it credit for.
Yeah, and I think when you get a guy like Derek Brown, even if he's not going to put up these monster sack numbers and pass rush numbers, he's not a guy that you're going to take off the field on third down. And having a guy that can be a 3-down player that can be a force against the run and give you something as a pass rusher, whether that's 3 or 4 sacks and 30 pressures or 40 pressures, but I think he has potential to give you a lot more than that. And I think some of this stuff with like his combine was he just came in heavy, and like if you just get him to drop like 10 or 15 pounds, like he'll be able to give you a lot more value as a pass rusher. And like going back to the conversation we had earlier about Derek Brown, like his broad jump was like ridiculous for a guy his size, like 326 pounds to jump as far as he did. Like that's pretty high when you compare it to sort of other players. Most guys that jump that far are like those 290-pound D tackles or whatever. So he's jumping like a 290 guy at carrying 30 extra pounds of muscle. So I think that speaks, to when you're looking at, particularly for me, I don't know, and this is something I've learned from watching the Falcons over the last couple of years, is like when I'm looking at D tackles and I'm looking at the combine and the testing, like I don't care about 40. I don't care about the agility stuff. If you have a great agility, awesome, but like I don't need it. I want that broad jump to be great, because that's going to be that first step quickness and that explosion that you're going to, be hitting guards with and hitting centers with. And I think Derek Brown has that. So, I think that going back, just reiterating the point I made earlier, I think Derek Brown's going to be a great building block for the Panthers for years to come. And, transitioning from, the Quan Short era to the Derek Brown era, I think it's going to be a really good move for the Panthers moving forward.
I have a question for you guys about when you talk about a 3-down player, right, and the value of that. In today's NFL, do you see that sometimes I've seen this with the Panthers a little bit, is that you get a player who isn't a 3-down player. They're really great, though, but it's really hard to figure out how to get them rhythm find the proper rotation. So don't you kind of need in today's NFL, if you're going to be cycling in the Brian Burns kind of player and running these different sets, though, a couple of guys that are out there doing the dirty work every down.
Yeah.
I mean, you certainly can't play these guys 80-90% of the snaps and expect, a long-term return on investment. I mean, you want to, especially depending on what the weight's going to be at. I mean, if he does, in fact, cut some weight, maybe he can play that throughout his whole rookie contract, but you kind of want to manage that and keep him in the 60 to 70% realm. So yeah, you definitely need to have those early down guys to take some of the pressure off. And I think that's why, Falcons, they coveted a guy like Tyler Davidson. I mean, he can do some of the dirty work. A guy like Alan Bailey can do some of the dirty work. So you need those players certainly in a rotation. I mean, that's defensive line. It's big. Rotations are big. Especially in today's NFL. So,
and learning what is that noise?
Yeah, someone like writing next to their microphone.
oh wait, could be my.
I'll jump out.
My thought was is that when we saw Brian Burns get less than 50% of the snaps last year. And it just was, and it was kind of maddening to think that your number one prospect on defense, when the coaching staff continues to tell you that they're kind of a liability against the run, and you have the worst run defense in the league. So it's just like so much of it is getting the rotation right too.
Yeah, well, I mean, I was a huge fan of Burns. I wanted the Falcons to take him. I don't know. That'll be one of the interesting things to watch from an outsider's point of view, the difference in the new coaching staff with him. Because was it true that I saw Brian Burns on the punt coverage team a few times? Yeah,
that's why our big joke is on the podcast is that Chase Young is going to be the rookie special teams player of the year.
Yeah. So, again, I think it's going to be a breath of fresh air to have Matt Rule and his guys there, because I think Burns is a great player. I think he should be, close to an every down player for them. I mean, at least when I watched his college tape, I didn't see a guy that couldn't defend against the run to use his length to set the strong edge, especially, I guess they're going to be a 3-4. Is that correct? Or
I don't really know yet. Is that we've seen Snow run both in the past at Temple and Baylor. Most recently, I think they ran a 3-4. I'm not sure.
I mean, that would probably suit Burns the best.
I think, and that's where our kind of personnel is.
Yeah, it seems
lined up at the point is Brian Burns, Christian Miller, Marquise Haynes.
Right.
But I think when you look at the players that they've added this offseason, I feel like they're adding more 4-3 guys like Chris Smith, Stephen Weatherly, Gross Matos. Those guys seem more like 4-3 defensive ends than guys that
you don't think they can be 3-4 D ends?
I mean, Weatherly's like 265, Gross Matos like 265, Chris Smith's like 260. Yeah.
And you're trying to put, well, if it was a 3-4, think about this: is you'd be putting KK short. It would be KK, Derek Brown, and
that's nice. And then you have a bunch
Zach
of DNs, I guess. Oh yeah, true. Yeah, Zach. So I mean, maybe they are just going to be very multiple because of Snow's experience doing both. So keep offenses on their toes. That wouldn't be a bad strategy. Sounds like they got a bunch of personnel to fit both. So
I think part of it too, last year, one, we were a team going to the 3-4. We had some injuries, but our coaching staff has never been a team that has been quick to count on rookies. Like they're not ready. They're not ready. Is like, and I mean, we would rather start, I'm trying to think of some of the guys that we've had good players on the bench, and we just leave these other guys in because they got more reps, right? And it's like the coaching staff just feels like they're less of a liability. So I don't know, Ron Rivera is just kind of conservative. He's a veterans coach, in my opinion. He tends to do well with teams that have a lot of vets on them rather than young guys, and so maybe that this staff, and that's what we were excited about, is that we wanted a staff that was a teaching staff. And I think that that's more and more important each year as the NFL gets younger, right? And the reduction in time and hitting and tackle and all the rules that are placed on high school to college now is players are just less prepared in some ways, and in other ways, they're more athletic than ever. They're more talented than ever, but sometimes they're not more experienced. And so in the NFL, I think you have to be a little bit more teaching today than you did maybe 10 years ago.
Matt, we got a question in the chat. They want you to talk a little bit more about your thoughts on Michael Walker.
Yeah, I mean, as I said on Twitter, versatility is, I think, the biggest thing that he's going to provide the Falcons. In 2018, he was kind of along the edge on the Sam. So that's one reason why, you might think Walker is, the 1-for-1 Devondre Campbell replacement is going to be the Sam in the base defense. But in 2019, then he transitioned at Fresno State to the Mike middle linebacker spot. So, right now I'm just looking at Walker as competition for Foy. As I said earlier to the guys in here, I mean, one of my biggest questions is, how's this defense going to look? Are they going to transition more back to the more traditional base 4-3 under defense? If that's the case, then you'll need those 3 linebackers on the field, and Walker could be a year 1 contributor in the same way Devondre Campbell was. Or if we're sticking to that 3-4 bare front and you have Dante Fowler and Tack McKinley as the edge rushers, then you only need 2 linebackers. So at that point, Foy and Michael Walker, there could be a camp competition for that spot at will. Or, again, I've always said I'd love to see Deion Jones get moved to will and, have Foy and Michael Walker be the Mike, but just to keep Deion free so that he can make plays in space. But it's probably just a pipe dream at this point. So, yeah, I love the versatility of Michael Walker. Again, shout out to Tony Pauline. He's the one that put him on my radar. I do think he has some Fred Warner vibes, which, again, it's a lot to place on him. Fred Warner is one of the better coverage linebackers in football. But, I think Michael Walker can do a little bit of everything. And, again, I love this value. I love this pick. And that's one of the things I want to see. I want to see competition for Foy. And, again, Michael Walker's the guy that can play all 3 spots for the Falcons.
Okay. Well, one last point I do want to throw out. He's very new to football too, from what I know. So I don't even think we've seen the best of him. I think he's just kind of scratching the surface. Because I think he only played maybe 1 year of high school football before, I think going the JUCO route and then going to Fresno State. I'll have to look back on that and, check my Twitter for some of that stuff later today. But very new to the game. And I think just scratching the surface of what he can be as a linebacker at the next level. Okay. Well, I was just going to say, for those of you guys watching, I just put in the link in the chat. So if anybody watching the show wants to join the show and jump on and, ask their questions and talk a little football with Matt and Tony, and there's supposed to be a couple other people that said that they were going to come through today, you can do so. The link is there in the chat. All you need, if you have a computer, you have a phone, you can join the show. If we get a whole bunch of people that want to come in, I might have to, sit here and be like, okay, get your question out and let's sort of roll through people. But, the floor is open for anybody that wants to join in and join the conversation today that we're having about the draft and ask questions or insert their 2 cents.
Did we talk at all about Trent Williams' deal in here? You guys bring that up at all?
Briefly, we talked a little.
What do we think about that? I mean, didn't see that fit coming at all. I don't know what that. I mean, Joe Staley's under contract for 2 more years. What do you think the plan is for the 49ers there? Does Joe Staley become the left guard? Does he have any experience playing guard?
Not that I know of. Maybe he did early in his career. Maybe he played guard as a rookie, but that was so long ago, I can't remember.
Yeah, I mean, he's been in the league since 05 almost, or it's like
Imagine how well they can run the ball. Good God.
Yeah, they're just run behind big old Trent on the left-hand side. It's and they didn't give up any picks in this draft, did they? Because they didn't have any.
I think it was a 5th.
They had a 5th left. I didn't think they even had a 5th left over. I know it was a 5th and a 3rd, but I thought it was.
My question when Trent Williams comes is, even though he's traded to a different team, unless he gets a contract, isn't he just going to continue to be unhappy?
That's part of it.
I guess the expectation was that they'd work something out. He's certainly got a lot of football, I think, left in him. I mean, he's a guy I can see like Jason Peters playing up until 36, 37, provided that, health was a factor in what tore the relationship in Washington, them mismanaging his medical. So as long as that all checks out, I don't see any reason why they wouldn't give him a long-term deal.
The chat is saying that Staley's retiring.
Interesting. Okay. Well, then there's that explanation. Yeah. So it'd be Trent Williams on the left, Laken Tomlinson, I guess, is their left guard, Weston Richburg center, former Falcon Daniel Brunskill might be the right guard, or I know they have also another former Falcon, Tom Compton, and then McGlinchey is the right tackle. So, yeah, I mean, Kyle Shanahan knows offensive line play, knows the run game, and adding a guy like Trent Williams, especially when you only made 2 draft picks, like one of my thoughts for them was going all in on Brandon Ayuk, who, in my opinion, is a bit redundant to Deebo Samuel, was, doing something like that is what closes windows when you don't have enough, rookie contracts. And I guess Trent Williams isn't a rookie contract, but he's certainly an impact type player. So to get Trent Williams, Brandon Ayuk, and Javon Kinlaw out of this draft class this offseason,
I think Ayuk brings a different skill set than Deebo does.
I mean, do you think like a downfield skill set?
I think that's really what Ayuk does best, is stretch the. I know he didn't run it fast.
I would say yards after the catch is what he does best, which again is what Deebo Samuel does best. But we'll see.
I mean, he's one, but I think why he does yards after the catch, because he's the guy that you can turn a 5-yard slant into a 40-yard gain because of the speed. Not necessarily. What
did he run? He didn't run.
He ran like a 4.53 or something, but like he's obviously faster than that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think they'll plug him in because they needed that X that can stretch the defense, because they haven't really had that in like 3 years with Marquise Goodwin. So I thought, with Henry Ruggs, potentially being the pick at the top of round 1, but obviously the Raiders took him at 12, so he wasn't available. So I think that partially fueled why they traded back with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and also because they needed to pick up picks. Your boy Anthony McFarland got drafted by the Steelers.
I just saw a tweet that said, in a draft where we had Winfield Jr. and Pittman Jr., somehow this McFarland is not related to Booger.
He's not related to Booger?
Right.
Hey, Neil, we're getting some feedback on the Noel. I'm sorry, we're getting a little bit of feedback. Do you
some background noise there?
Yeah, Noel, you're a fan from Puerto Rico, right?
Yes, I am. How you doing?
How you doing today, man?
Hey, Noel, what's going on?
I'm doing great. Hi, Matt.
What do you think of the Falcons' moves thus far, Noel? You a fan of what you've seen?
I am not hearing very well. I'm gonna. Yes, I'm gonna.
Can you hear us, Noel?
Hello.
Can you hear us?
Better? Yes, I do now. I had the YouTube also screen in it, so I had double sound over there.
So what are your thoughts on the Falcons draft so far?
I love them. I had AJ Terrell like my fourth cornerback, but as I see his size and his speed, when I saw everything, I saw your mock, I say that's the guy because I haven't seen him very well. I was always focused, the media in Okuda or Henderson. It was like a lot on that we're gonna pick Henderson. So when that's why everyone was like, no, AJ Terrell, but I think it's a great pick. I definitely love the Davidson pick. That's the guy
He's a monster.
that's my favorite. Yeah, he's a monster, like a badass.
Yep.
And Hennessy, I love it because Alex Mack is in his last year of the contract, and you don't expect a center to be playing right away. So this opportunity to play or learn from Mac, it would be so awesome. So, and the linebacker, I know you were very high on Mac.
Yep.
And I think we needed it. We're just filling needs. That's
filling needs at good value too. I mean, again, Davidson was looked at as a late 1-2, early 2 pick, and that's where we got him. Terrell was getting a lot of steam in the middle of the first round, and it seems like on a lot of NFL teams' board, he was the third cornerback. So he went where he was valued, and then getting Hennessy in round 3, I thought, as I said at the top, was tremendous. And then I think again, Michael Walker. I don't know if everyone had him in round 4, but I certainly that's where I would have taken him. And again, love that pick. I think he's got Fred Warner vibes and versatility to play all 3 linebacker spots. So injuries and stuff, sure. You can just plug Michael Walker into that spot that you need him at.
Yeah, that's right. I'm sorry. I wrote earlier in the chat that I was to Aaron say to Tony that I love their picks, so I didn't want to miss that. So I love your picks, man.
Yeah, thank you. We're having a good draft. All defense right now. The rebuild is on, as Aaron said, and fast players, and you're going to need a defense in this NFC now.
Noel, what was I gonna ask you? I forgot anyway. I'll figure it out. So what are you looking this way? What are you looking for the rest of the draft?
For me, right now, I don't mind. You could go DPA because you have wide receivers. You can have a return man, and you can have if Kenny Willikis is over there and we pick, that's a guy that our DN was working with, and it's a heck of. I saw a video of him doing backflips, and that's all the. Hey man, that's a great athlete. So I don't mind if Kenny. I would love to get Kenny Willikis over here, but right now I just so happy and so pumped with our first 3 picks or 4 picks. I don't mind. I don't care.
Yeah, at this point, I'm with you. I mean, as I said, my 5th thing would be to maybe add a pass catcher just to, mitigate some of the risk of, losing Hooper, Sanu, and Freeman. I mean, they had about 160 plus receptions of the 400 last year. Obviously we added Hurst to be the Hooper replacement. The expectation, I guess, is to continue to get Russell Gage worked in there, and Todd Gurley would replace Freeman. But I don't think it would hurt to add another pass catcher, especially in a historically deep wide receiver class like this. The names aren't necessarily there. Is Antonio Gandy Golden? Did he go off the board yet? Do we know?
No, I don't think so.
So I mean that's a name, Aaron. I think were you a fan of him? I mean, I think I saw you said something about that's what people expect Laquan Treadwell to be, is what Antonio Gandy Golden. Did I get that right?
Yeah.
So I mean that's a name as a potential X or slot receiver to back up. I think there's some speed guys left, like John Hightower, Darnell Mooney, Joe Reed, who offers some kick return, punt return abilities. So I wouldn't mind seeing, an offensive, weapon just to continue to keep the cupboard stocked for Matt Ryan as he enters the twilight here. But they can go in a multitude of different directions, and I don't think I'm going to complain a whole lot. I think they've nailed these first 4 picks, in my opinion.
Noel, appreciate you joining. We got Adnan coming in. Want to thank you for jumping on the show, and have a good day, man. Keep watching.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Yeah, thanks, Noel.
See you guys.
Adnan, thoughts on the Falcons' pick of Michael Walker?
I like it. Like I said earlier, if they can address the linebacker need in the 4th round, I'd be all for it, and that's exactly what they did. Walker has good size, very good tackler. He reads plays in front of him very well, high IQ guy. They say that he doesn't have great aggressiveness, but nobody can be perfect in the 4th round. But Michael Walker is someone who should have the inside track to start alongside Foy, Oluwakin, and Deion Jones come week 1, because the linebacker depth really isn't there that much for the Falcons. But I can't complain at all. They've addressed every single defensive need almost in this draft. They got their cornerback. They got their starting defensive tackle. They got their starting linebacker now. So it's been nothing but starters so far, and I'm happy with it.
Yeah. I'm looking at Dane Brugler's draft guide, and he had him graded as a 7th round pick. But reading up on sort of where he puts his strengths and weaknesses seems pretty much exactly what the Falcons typically want in their linebackers. I guess the big question mark is sort of how well he handles coverage, I guess. Do you think that's a fair criticism of Walker?
Yeah, I think so. And it's something that he'll have to be coached up by Jeff Ulbrich. But I trust one thing that I really like. I really trust the Falcons' assistant coaches, whether it's Ulbrich, whether it's Witt Jr. in the secondary. I think these defensive guys will really be able to be coached up and developed moving forward. And like I said, I'd much rather roll this dice with Michael Walker in the 4th round on day 3, as opposed to not addressing the linebacker position at all on day 3 and going into it with, I guess it'll be a Leroy Reynolds would have been the starter.
Don't
judging
get me
by the
started
depth chart.
on Leroy Reynolds. I can go all day on how terrible that move was.
Well, I tell you, CBS is really loving the Panthers draft, right? I just all A or A+ grades. Not as much. They gave Terrell a C+, Marlon Davidson a B-, Matt Hennessy a B+, and Mykal Walker a C+. Is what I mean. Now these guys are pumping this out super quick.
Yeah. Grades have never been great to the Falcons.
It is Chris Trapasso, but he did both of the stories for Carolina and Atlanta.
I don't put too much stock into grades like that, especially a lot of the national people don't follow the Falcons enough to really know what they need, what they like. I don't know if it's the same way with the Panthers, if you've noticed that with national writers, if they hit the nail on the head or they're just way off base. But
national writers don't ever know the nuances of a team.
So yeah, that's what the beat writers are for. That's what sources like the Falcoholic are for. Places like this, you really know the nitty gritties down to the details of what the team needs are and what they look for. So, but yeah, I will say with the Panthers, there's not a pick on there that I really question. I don't know if what did they do in round 3 or was that?
Yeah, that was Chin.
Okay. So
Jeremy Chin. Yeah.
Very top of round 3.
Yes.
Was that the trade up? That was the trade up. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, they have Derek Brown, they have Chin, they have YGM, and they have Troy Pride. Those are their picks.
Your thoughts on YGM? Did we get them earlier, Aaron?
It's not a great edge rusher class, but I had him as my third-rated edge rusher in this class. I think, there's some rawness to him that he's going to need to develop, but they have, we talked about, they have a lot of guys where I think he can, sit behind, learn behind. He doesn't need to be pressed into action right away. Love his length. My comp for him is potentially Shaq Lawson, where he might not ever be a top flight pass rusher. His cap might be 7-8 sacks, but I think he can be a 3-down player. I think he can be a good run defender. And, as we were talking about 3-down player, where he can play first, second, and third down, it's just, is he that threat that offense is game plan for? Is he that terrorizer as a pass rusher? I don't know if he'll ever be that. Maybe if he hits his ceiling. But, yeah, I think he's a solid player with a pretty high floor.
Nice.
And did I miss you saying this, after getting the linebacker for the Falcons? Are you just in like best player available mode at this point?
Yeah. At this point, it's if the best player is an edge rusher, then great. Someone like Curtis Weaver maybe, but I completely trust them. I think they now have the luxury, after filling all of these defensive needs, after filling the need of interior offensive line. You can just go BPA, and if they think that that's a wide receiver, then fantastic. They think it's an edge rusher, perfect. It's you can do whatever you want with a pretty good day 3 selection in round 4 right now, and that's a great luxury to have. And just real quick on the grades, I still remember the 2016 grades the day after.
That's right.
I think it was like Bleacher Report or CBS or someone was saying that the Falcons.
I feel like it was Pro Football Focus. I mean, maybe multiple outlets were bashing them, but I know Pro Football Focus graded those Neal and Deion Jones picks terribly. And
they said that the Falcons got them a full round higher than they should have, but Neal wouldn't have been there in the second round. I think the Raiders would have taken him.
Yeah.
And Deion Jones, I mean, you can tell that they loved Deion Jones, and there's good reason for it. He's become one of the best inside linebackers in the league. And in that draft, they also got Austin Hooper. They got Devondre Campbell, Wes Schweitzer in the 6th round. And I know we don't have too fond memories of Wes Schweitzer, but he was a solid 6th rounder. He's someone who's made it to his second contract. He was a great depth piece along the interior of the offensive line. That draft was the best draft they've had since 2008, in my opinion, and they got constantly bashed for it.
Yeah, and you can even argue top to bottom it was the best one, just because 2008 obviously has Matt Ryan at the top, Hall of Fame player, but yeah, top to bottom, getting contributors the way they did, year 1 contributors. So yeah, that's exactly why you can't put too much stock in some of these grades. You just got to see how it plays out and just trust the fit that some of these guys are, which I think they're all fits that the Falcons have gotten. And I think the Panthers can make the same argument for the players that they've gotten.
I think with grades too, whoever's writing them is grading it based on what their overall kind of big board was.
Yeah.
Right. And that is, so is either it fits with my view of what the draft was going to be, or it doesn't. And, and you could probably see that. And that's where I also, what you were mentioning that draft with Keanu Neal and stuff is, I always get irritated when someone says, "Oh, I like this guy, but I would have taken him at 28 rather than 17." Is that unless we're at the top 10 for me, is what I feel like is that's just you putting, like, I don't like that idea. It's like, well, if you liked him at 33, you should like him at 24.
That's nitpicking. That's nitpicking right there. Because teams generally only have like 15 to 20 first round grades on players. So once you get towards, the middle back half, the first round, you are taking guys that you have second round grades on. So,
oh, look, they're going up again in ECU on this tape.
That's your school, right, Tony?
Yeah. Best midfield logo in college football. And also, since we have been straight garbage for the last couple of years, we've got a pretty good, we have a rich football history for a smaller school, and that doesn't get the best recruits and stuff. But we've had a tough couple of years under a a coach who was unprepared for the job. So we got a new coach. Anyway, our whole joke is we're ahead of the curve on the Corona dip in attendance, is we know what it's like to field a football game with 10,000 people now or 7,000 people. Good God.
I wonder where Pirate alum Justin Hardy's going to wind up if any team's going to give him a vet min contract to show what he can do. Because again, Aaron and I have talked about it on this show. I mean, he can be a reliable receiver, third receiver, fourth receiver in this league. Just kind of some unfortunate circumstances. I mean, they signed Mohamed Sanu the year after he was drafted, and that was pretty much supposed to be his role. And Mohamed Sanu took that over, and kind of the rest was history on him. But Pirates' all-time leading receiver, right, Justin Hardy.
Well, I think it got broken by Zay Jones.
Oh, that's right.
Who's also been a disappointment in the NFL.
Yeah.
Justin Hardy, to me, is the better player of the two. Is that Zay Jones had he's a faster guy, right? Yeah. Justin Hardy, though, is just savvy. He's savvy out there, and he's got great hands. So I think you're exactly right. He does have the ability to be an effective third or fourth receiver on a team, and a reliable one. He's always available, it feels like.
Yep.
Really did not get a good shake in Atlanta, and not just hold it against those guys. It's just for some reason he just was always the odd man out.
Yep.
If he was more dangerous in the return game, like Aaron said, is that he's the 5-yarder punt return guy. If he was I think that would solidify his value, but I tell you, he doesn't drop the ball, man.
No, he's reliable. That's the best way of putting it for him. And yeah, I mean, he is a little bit like fair catch Franks was, Dominique Franks back in the day. It's a punt returner, too conservative. But again, it seems like the Falcons with their return game, they're more, they like to play it safe than be aggressive. I mean, that's why they didn't use Taylor Gabriel ever there or Calvin Ridley there. So it'll be interesting to see. It looks like they're going to take that safe approach right now anyways with Brandon Powell, unless they do something here in the later parts of the draft. But
he was a walk-on in college too.
We got a guest, Martin. What's up, man?
Afternoon. How you doing?
How's it going, Martin?
It's going good. Thought I'd join you for the next pick.
Yeah, absolutely.
You coming from the UK? Is that an accent?
Sounds like
Scotland.
it.
Yeah.
Scotland.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I'll try and speak slowly.
We appreciate that. What are your thoughts on the Falcons pick so far?
I've been really happy. I think they've picked players to fill really obvious holes, holes that have been left with departing players, and it's kind of tough to argue with that stuff. With the AJ Terrell pick, maybe a bit underwhelmed to begin with. But so much of that just comes from, I suppose, pre-draft media and, getting really focused in on particular players like CJ Henderson and things. And, when there's a very clear demand for cornerbacks like there was in the first round, I think you've got to make the move. So I'm pleased that they stood pat at 16 and picked a player that filled the need. So beyond that, Hennessy was the only guy that I think I've successfully mock drafted in however many 100 mock drafts I've done. So I'm pleased with the Hennessy pick. And then Davidson's one of those guys that it makes all the sense in the world after the pick is made. But again, thought Madubuike would maybe be the pick. But glad given that it seems like Davidson's an immediate contributor kind of guy that we went with him. So I think it's been a strong draft. I think they can kind of do as they please now.
I just noticed the Falcons are now on the clock at 134. Did they always have 134? I thought they had like 149.
They got it with the Ravens.
I thought it was 143 as well. I thought it was later. So I was like, what?
So that is, in fact, the Ravens pick?
I think so. I think they swapped their fifth for the Ravens' fourth in the Hayden Hurst trade.
Okay. I knew they did that, but I thought, again, as Aaron said too, I thought that was 143, but I'm not going to complain, I guess. Picking 9 spots.
Martin, you talk about the pre-draft process. That was part of the reason why I was able to pick AJ Terrell, because I'm like, there's no way that anybody's going to successfully pick who the Falcons are going to pick. It's not going to be as obvious as CJ Henderson as everybody seems to think it's going to be, because the Falcons always zig. So that sort of started the process of looking for some alternative options, and eventually led to AJ Terrell sort of being the pick.
Yeah. There's some other corners that I felt did fit the need, and if Sheffield wasn't really somebody that they trusted 100%, I could have kind of seen them leaving it until maybe the third round and really prioritizing interior O-line and interior D-line. But yeah, it made all the sense in the world once the pick had been made.
It does seem like, because I had guys like Christian Fulton, Trayvon Diggs, and Jeff Gladney ranked higher than AJ Terrell on my personal board, but it does seem like character really weighed out in that pick, where guys like Fulton had the failed drug test his freshman year. Trayvon Diggs had a lot of things out there with him. And then Gladney, Albert Breer, I saw multiple times reported some off-the-field stuff with him. So, AJ Terrell, clean bill of character. Dabo Sweeney gave him a glowing endorsement, comparing him to, the Deshaun Watson of the defensive side of the ball. Looks like the pick is in. Jalen Hawkins. It's always one pick that I don't know who that is.
Jalen Hawkins. That name is familiar.
Safety from California. So we thought maybe they'd take a safety as a depth player. I don't know if I would assume he's a strong safety, because Ashton Davis was the free safety right at Cal. But Jalen Hawkins is the 4th round pick. And I have no takes on Jalen Hawkins. I apologize. I don't know.
6'1", 208. I'm looking at Dane Brugler's
yeah, I should probably pull that up.
draft guide.
And again, we've shouted out The Athletic on here before. If you're not subscribed to The Athletic, you're doing it wrong. I mean, Dane's draft guide in itself, I think, is worth the $60 a year. I mean, it's packed with tons and tons of prospect breakdowns.
Also, use your alumni email address and get the student discount, dude.
Yeah, I mean, for those that are students out there. So Jalen Hawkins, priority free agent, 30th ranked safety on Dane's board, which again, can't just take one analyst's opinion on certain players. But
basically, the skinny he has is overall Hawkins plays with the required instincts and toughness for the position, but his questionable coverage, athleticism is the hang up, projecting best as a special teamer. Okay. So, Martin, thoughts on the Falcons getting a safety that might just be a special teamer?
Yeah, I suppose it's a bit concerning to see lack of cover talent as one of the first things mentioned in draft profile. And not reliable as a tackler in the open field, which, so both of those things I suppose made me a little bit nervous, but I guess defensive backs in general have been a place that the pairing of DQ and Dimitrov have had a fairly good record with. So I'm kind of willing to assume I don't know better on this one.
Yeah, I feel like, again, they could have moved down and certainly got him in the 5th or 6th round, but again, not going to let it ruin the goodwill of those first 4 picks. This is a guy that's maybe going to compete with Sherrod Naismith for one of those backup safety roles, and obviously on special teams. Right now, again, not knowing a whole lot about Hawkins, I would just say Naismith would beat him out, and there's legitimate concern that maybe Hawkins wouldn't even make the 53-man roster. But I think it's a bit early to jump the gun on that. We'll see. But certainly my least favorite pick now here, and now we got a bunch of time to wait until round 7. So we'll see what they do there. So they've gone 4 defensive picks. I would, again, history shows, 5 years of data show that they like to even it out a bit. So I would place my money on somewhere on the offensive side of the ball in round 7 here to finish this thing off. But guess we'll see.
I feel like that pick, I thought the wide receiver might be on the cards given the players that were available at that spot. And Laquan Treadwell kind of struck me as a flyer where, we're bringing him in. We'll see how it goes. To me, if that pick doesn't get made, his roster spot seems pretty safe. As does Olamide Zaccheaus. And I guess I'm a bit surprised that there would only be kind of undrafted competition that they bring in against those guys.
I'm reading Jalen Hawkins' profile on NFL.com, and they put this as a weakness. I think this is a strength. Has a history of targeting penalties. So I'm all for that.
Oh, he's a hitter. He's a hitter.
The targeting rule is, to me, the thing I hate the most about college football. It's
Thumper.
probably in their overtime rules. I think they need to tweak those. But so that's a strength to me. So I'm on it. I'm for it. He's a targeter. So I'll take that all day.
Yeah. Fast and
all right, Aaron, I'm going to go ahead and dip out, man.
I appreciate it, Tony, man.
Yeah, man. You guys have a good one. Nice chat with you guys.
Good talking with you, man. Take care. I'm going to head out soon in a bit as well. But yeah, all in all, I like this draft. Again, got competition at linebacker filling a hole. Got an attitude and enforcer, if you will, on the defensive line in Marlon Davidson. And then, getting AJ Terrell, I think, can be a very good cornerback in this league. I think I underrated him a bit from a physicality standpoint. The reason why I put some of these other guys ahead of him, I thought they were more physical corners, but going back, especially in that LSU game, which we're probably going to have to hear it all summer as far as how that fared for him. But you go back and look at the coverage reps, especially the ones in target. I mean, Terrell was in great position on pretty much every one of those plays. And sometimes you just have to tip your cap to the quarterback and the receiver. And in this case, I mean, first overall pick, Joe Burrow, and the other guy being probably, unless injuries or something hits, he's going to be a top 5 pick, Jamar Chase, next year. I mean, just got to tip your cap to those guys because I think Terrell played him about as tough as you can really expect a cornerback to play an elite receiver like that. So he is physical, he is long, he is athletic, and then he's got the character. So he makes up all the ingredients that you look for. And knowing that the Raiders are going to take him at 19, I don't think you can no longer classify him as a reach because he wouldn't have been there if they traded back. And at that point, who do you think, a question to pose, and I don't know if you answered this anywhere, but if they did trade back and didn't get their target in Terrell, who do you think's the next guy up? I would think it's like Noah Iggy. And for me, the Auburn cornerback, for me, he's just a little bit too raw. I thought he went to a spot, which was a little confusing, but he went to a spot in Miami where they have Byron Jones, they have Xavier Howard. He doesn't need to play right away. That's a great situation for him. But if he would have had to been the Falcons' first-round cornerback, I'd be a little bit more concerned about that because I'm not sure he's ready to be a year-one contributor. I could be wrong on that assessment, but that's my take on that. So to not get your guy, I think would have been more disappointing than having to take a player that might not be able to contribute for you right away.
No, I agree. Because part of it, I was like everybody else. My first impression of AJ Terrell was that championship game, and I was just like, "Oh yeah, he's not good," and it kind of dismissed him. And then basically, like a week before the draft, people were telling me like he's going to go in the first round. All these mock drafts that have him going in round 2 are wrong. Like he's definitely going in the first round. The Raiders love him. They're going to take him at 19. And so that sort of then I finally decided, okay, let me watch him because maybe he's in the mix for the Falcons. And watching him on the film, he's pretty much exactly what the Falcons like in their cornerbacks. So it was one of those things where I think you're right. Like we're going to constantly, everybody's first, what's the saying? Like, first impressions are the ones that last. And so everybody's first impression was watching him get torched by Jamar Chase. And you talk about tipping the cap to the wide receiver, tipping the cap to the quarterback. I mean, I don't think I saw Joe Burrow miss a single pass that was thrown more than 20 yards down the field. I mean, his placement on deep balls was perfect.
Yeah.
And Jamar Chase is just too big, too strong, and that's a legitimate knock on AJ Terrell, like against the premier receivers that have that elite speed, against the Tyreek Hills, against the Mike Evans, the guys that have that size, he's going to have problems. But how many cornerbacks in the league can match up with those types of receivers to begin with? Not very many. So I don't think I would necessarily hold that against them. That next tier of receivers, I feel like he can hold his own against those guys moving forward. So we'll see how it goes.
There was suggestion that he was unwell on the day of the national championship game, which
I did hear that as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I heard that
103, 104-degree fever, apparently. So that's something to consider as well. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, but it is what it is. I think he'll be a good player here in Atlanta. And the thing that we talked about earlier, now like 2 hours ago on the show, was that I forgot. I'm sorry, my brain is operating on very little sleep over the last couple of days.
I hear you.
Dang it, what was I? I literally had it in my head.
Just went blank, just like that.
Whatever we talked about it 2 hours ago. So there you go.
Just
there you guys go.
rewind the tape and you can check it out. But do you have other guests coming in? I mean, I don't want to just leave you hanging. I don't know.
No. I had plans on sort of how to fill time.
Okay. I'm going to dip out. It's great to be back on with you, talking about some of these things, and I'm sure we'll chop it up on Twitter.
Yeah, absolutely, man.
All
Have
right.
a good one.
Take it easy, guys. See you, Martin.
see you later.
Martin, I want to ask you some questions that aren't necessarily football related.
Okay.
Did you stay up for the first round pick?
Yeah.
What time was it over there? It was like 3 a.m. or something like that?
So it started at 1, finished at 5, which is a bit rough.
Yeah.
I'm kind of I'm fairly used to it because it's the same story if it's a late Sunday game. If it's the Monday night game, I tend to just watch it on Game Pass the next day. So I've got coping mechanisms, which are kind of mostly coffee and sugar, but they do work.
Yeah, man. I was up Thursday night. I was up till 4 a.m. Watching the draft, doing all the breakdowns, recording podcasts and whatnot. So it was one of those things. And last night, I think I finally got to bed by like 2 a.m. So like, that's obviously you have to deal with that a lot more when it comes to Falcons football and the draft and whatnot. But I could definitely feel you on that takes a level of dedication. So definitely, I think a lot of us on this side of the pond, appreciate the dedication that you guys put in. Are you excited about, well, we'll see how the season goes, but are you excited that the Falcons will be playing overseas this year?
Yeah, so that would be, providing the international series goes ahead, that would be my 4th Falcons game. So I saw the Lions London game. That was obviously the first, which was a great game. Obviously, it ended with heartbreak, but that would be part of the Falcons' experience, to be fair. So, they brought disappointment with them over the pond as well. So that was okay. Second time was in New York against the Jets in an extremely rainy day, but they did win. And then last year, I was lucky enough to come over and see a game in the Benz. Unfortunately, well, not unfortunately, because he had a good day, but it was the Matt Schaub passes all over the Seattle Seahawks game. So I've now seen the greatest quarterback in Falcons history in person. So
yeah, there you go, man. There you go. So you've seen it all. You've seen the range. Falcons losing the last second game the Falcons, greatness in Matt Schaub. The first game not the first game I saw in the Georgia Dome. The second game I saw in the Georgia Dome back in the day was Matt Schaub killing the Patriots. They lost that game eventually, but it was going to be my first Vic game. And it was back in, I think, 2005. And Vic was like a scratch that morning, and they had to start Matt Schaub. And I was just like, oh man, we came all the way down here to watch Michael Vick, and now we got to see Matt Schaub. And I can't remember what numbers he put up, but he put up numbers in that game as well. And it's just like, whenever Matt Schaub, say what you will about his time as a starter in places like Houston and elsewhere, but whenever Matt Schaub has in the field as a Falcons quarterback, it's always entertaining, at least as far as I'm concerned. So I definitely appreciate it.
Yeah, definitely.
So we got some fresh faces from the Falcoholic, Dave and Corey. What's up, guys?
Howdy.
How's it going?
Hey, Dave.
Just commiserating with Martin over here. He's over in Scotland, how he's been forced to have to operate on no sleep just to keep up with the Falcons draft.
Yeah, I can't. I don't know about you, Aaron. I haven't gotten a ton of sleep, so I can't imagine being on that timeline. No, thank you.
I'm drinking this. I had 2 cups of coffee this morning. This is my second Coke this morning. So yeah, I'm purely operating on sugar and caffeine at this point in the day.
It's a good way to be.
Yeah. So what are your guys' thoughts on the Falcons draft so far?
I like it a lot so far, honestly. I don't know basically anything about Hawkins. I'm kind of learning as I go here. But the other 4 picks to this point, I think Terrell should be a good starter early on. I like the Davidson pickup a lot, if for no other reason than he has a wonderful attitude and way of talking about himself. So I think, for a needs-based class, I think they've gotten good players. And I like what they've done so far. I mean, I wasn't convinced coming into this class that they would do the smart thing and not trade up and, mortgage the future. And they've managed to resist that temptation so far and come away, I think, with a pretty solid haul. So, but that 7th rounder is critical, though. I don't want a punter.
Okay. Yeah, you mentioned Marlon Davidson with his attitude. Much has been made from Falcon fans, fair or not, about questions about certain pass rushers' attitudes over the last couple of years. I think, clearly the Falcons, whether they agree with that criticism of that player, certainly with the Davidson pick, are steering into that narrative that they want guys that have the quote unquote dog in them a little bit more. So he definitely checks that box. And so far it does seem like he's been far and away the most popular pick for the Falcons this draft class. And I think that's a big part of it. Corey, thoughts on the draft?
Oh, I hate it. It's just awful. And everything this team does. No, I really, really like it. I don't know. I'm a little more, I think, optimistic about what the future holds for this team. I think that the end of that last stretch of last season is much more indicative of what this team actually is when it has proper coaching. I think that the talent on this team is probably a lot better than I don't think it's like the Ravens or something, but I think it's a good football team. And I feel like that for what they had lost in free agency, that they've at least kind of balanced that scale. I was a big fan of what they did in free agency, and then with the draft, well, kind of a mix between the two. When you get a guy like AJ Terrell at 16 and you see the team be so excited about the fact that he was there, they were scared he was going to be gone. It may just be one of those things where he may be a little bit of a better player than maybe that draft consensus, I guess, was coming into it. Because I really do trust the team in terms of the way that they scout their cornerbacks. They seem to have really have like a 60-70% success rate with Dimitrov. And I think with Jalen Collins, the issue is probably a bit more off the field than it was on. But I like the Terrell pick a lot. I think it was a confident pick by the team. They didn't lose in any of the picks. I kind of thought that's what they needed to do, was just get that big defensive playmaker. And it seemed like everything was leading up to that. But seeing them take a different approach, I don't think is a terrible thing at all. Davidson's obviously great. They've just needed to get that guy next to Grady the entire time he's been there. he'll take up space. He has a motor. He can do some pass rush as well, and then obviously can play the run pretty well. So then you have Hennessy, who, I think there's a debate, I guess, going on right now whether he will be the guard for next season or if he's just kind of luxury depth for Alex Mack in the future of that position. Either way, I think it's a necessary pick. And obviously, if he does start at left guard, it makes it even more advantageous. And then with the two today, with the linebacker Walker, I don't know a lot about him, but I do know that he seems to have a lot of smart people who like his play, and he seems very Falcon-y with the versatility he has and the way that he can kind of have that side-to-side speed. So I'd like that. And then obviously with the one they just did with Hawkins, I was kind of hoping they would get a pass rusher there to continue to fill that out. I'm beginning to wonder if the John Kaminsky potential made them not really want to prioritize another edge guy in the fourth. But seems like they really want to kind of stack as much depth behind Keanu Neal as possible so they're not kind of caught flat-footed again like they were last season, and they have to trade for John Cyprien, who then gets hurt the first game he's in, and then they just don't really have any good option there. But I think it's a really good draft. I think it's a very patient approach. I think if you look at the fireworks in March, they went out and paid $1 bajillion for Dante Fowler. They got Todd Gurley, and they're really banking on his potential to really be the player he has been. But the draft seems to be a bit of kind of the flip side of that, where they really are just getting some nice building block players. And I mean, honestly, that's what they did in 2016, and it worked really well for them. They really weren't aggressive. They were patient. They took good players at every level that filled some good needs on their team, and we saw it pay off, at least in terms of the roster. I don't think we have any 2016 coaching coming our way, sadly, but I think the roster's in pretty good shape. I'm excited to see how this team will kind of coalesce as the fall goes on. I don't know if they're necessarily a Super Bowl contender, but I do think that they will be kind of back in contention for the playoffs, kind of like we saw in that pre-Shanahan era before they kind of fell apart in 2013. I think the 2012 Falcons have always been the barometer I've wanted to see them reach, where, they do a lot of things well. They have a lot of talent. They can get games where they beat you by 20. They can beat you by 3. So I'm optimistic.
Yeah. Okay. I had a thought in the middle of that, Corey. No offense.
Tends to be whenever I go on someone's podcast.
But as I've said to all the people that have been watching it, like, my brain is barely functioning at this point in time, so I can't hold much of a thought at this point in time. But I think it was something that had to do with Davidson, which, as I joked earlier, like, we're going to have a difficulty. I think we're just going to have to refer to him as Marlon, just because no one's going to know who we're talking about between Tyler Davidson and Marlon Davidson. So I'm just going to call him Marlon and Tyler, and hopefully people will understand who we're talking about going forward. But
Davidson seems like the player we needed during the Hard Knock season. He would have really been able to sell the whole kind of theme of that year.
Yeah, definitely.
With Hawkins, I suppose, speaking to Corey's point on picking players with versatility, I think everybody's, searching through the internet for draft profiles on Hawkins at this point, but it doesn't strike me that he's, immediately one of those versatile players. And yet, there were other safety options still on the board. There were other corner options still on the board. There were other linebacker options on the board even. So I'm kind of stuck between who is this guy and, well, we must really like him because, we've taken him here in the 4th round and nobody else had that. So, yeah, strange.
I remember my original thought, so hopefully I can be able to retain it after I follow up on what you said, Martin. I think, we might sit here, and again, I don't know anything about Hawkins, haven't watched him, so I don't want to necessarily be too prejudiced on him before I dive into the film later today. But because the Falcons only have a limited number of picks, this is the point in the draft on day 3 where teams are drafting for need. And so if they basically felt like, hey, we need a strong safety and we only have 2 picks left and this guy's not going to be there in round 7, we think he's going to be, normally we would pick him in round 5 or around 6, at least from their perspective, because they look at the need, they're going to draft him at this point in the draft. And so, I think probably it's potentially fair to say, okay, maybe this is a little bit of a reach, but teams tend to do that at this point in the draft when they're sort of looking at how many picks they have, and they're like, we need to fill these 2 holes and we only have 2 picks, so let's get our guy now, as opposed to hoping that we can get probably the 3rd or 4th option waiting to round 7. Dave, did you have any input into that?
No, I think, for my purposes, the only thing that surprised me thus far, and I will be curious to see if they address it all the way in round 7, is the lack of a pure edge rusher to add to the group. And maybe they have some plans for, Walker to dabble more in that role than they ever did with Campbell. But, there's still a couple of needs, I guess, that I'm surprised they haven't addressed. But anybody you get to in the 7th round at this point isn't guaranteed to fill that need anyways. So nothing would really surprise me when we get there. And I'm sorry if I didn't directly answer your question. I may have blacked out there for a minute.
No, it's fine. No, but you answering that question is the point I wanted to bring up that I forgot when Corey was talking. I've heard through the grapevine that they don't really look at edge rusher as that big a need because they're pretty high on Kaminsky and Steven Means and Jacob Tuioti Mariner. So it's not to say like they won't take an edge rusher, but I think it's more going to be, is the value there rather than necessarily looking at it as a need, because I think they seem pretty comfortable with the 5-man rotation that they potentially could have right now. I think they feel pretty comfortable that they had to go into the season with this 5-man group. They would have the options. The only question is similar to what we had last year when it was just basically Vic Beasley and Tack McKinley and Adrian Claiborne. And Claiborne, when they were doing that 3-4 stuff, wasn't really a good fit in that scheme. Is the concern is what happens if there's an injury to Dante Fowler or Tack McKinley? If John Kaminsky's future is as an interior guy, and who knows at this point in time, but one scenario is John Kaminsky spends this offseason bulking up because he's going to be playing more inside. Who's going to be that guy that's going to provide that edge rush on the outside? So I feel like everybody that thinks it's a need certainly is justified in thinking it's a need, but I don't know if the Falcons necessarily feel the same way. But we've kind of seen this story before where they kind of feel good about it. And they seem to be, and I'm a Steven Means fan. Don't get me wrong. I was like the original Steven Means fan. I was pining for him for like 2 years before he actually went to Atlanta. But, coming off of that Achilles injury, you do question it a little bit, because we saw that with Croy Bierman a couple of years ago where, through that first half of the season coming off of that, he was not very impactful. It led to a lot of people being very upset with how much he was playing over some other guys like Jonathan Massaquoi. But, Croy eventually turned it around in the second half of that 2014 season. But you do wonder if Steven Means is going to, how big a contribution he's going to make coming off of that injury. But they seem to be pretty confident in what he can do this upcoming season.
Yeah. And I like Means as well. It's just, to your point, supposedly if Kaminsky is that interior guy, which seems to be the buzz this offseason, I don't know if, I'm relying on Means and Tuioti Mariner as my guys in case of an injury. But, it's not maybe hopefully the biggest problem, and maybe overthinking and over worrying about it. Not that you can do that as a Falcons fan, but.
And they have the opportunity in June when they get that money from Trufont's deal coming off. Then they can, maybe go out there and get that edge rusher that everybody is pining for. So it may not be necessarily something that they have to do today. With this remaining pick, they can kind of afford to just take the best player available when we get to 228, which is probably just going to be a special teams player. But as you said, Dave, not a punter, right?
Muted myself there. Not a punter. I think I saw Sam Irwin-Hill, getting released, and I was like, oh no, here we go. I can't ever shake that feeling that they're gonna do something and draft a punter after they did it with Bosher all those years ago. That did turn out pretty well, but I'm hoping that the thing that I probably would like to see them address the most here in the 7th, if they get the chance to do it, is to try to get a returner who's got a little bit of value on offense. I think that'd be an interesting pickup. And with the way things are going, maybe somebody interesting will get all the way there, or maybe they'll swap a future pick to move up in the 7th, which would be a very Dimitrov thing to do, right?
Yeah.
What are the thoughts about the third tight end spot? Because this isn't supposed to have been a particularly good class. It seems like a lot of the better players are gone now, but we've got Hurst, we've got Graham. Presuming they'll both be on the 53, and after that, nothing or close to nothing.
Yeah, I mean they picked Corey Ellis, is that his name? Willis?
Lee.
Okay, I was just gonna name every last name in the book before I found the right one. He's a blocker, so he has the potential to sort of fill that shoes of sort of a Luke Stocker as a pure blocker. When I was evaluating tight ends, I didn't see a ton of guys that I thought were great blocking options, but I could see them possibly going after someone like a Sean McKean, a Jacob Breland or something like that in round 7, just to bring in somebody that they feel a little bit better about, at least the potential wise, because it does feel like Lee is more of a stopgap option for that third tight end spot than necessarily a guy that you would trust in to be a long-term option. But part of that is just bias because basically he's been kind of a journeyman these last couple of years and hasn't been able to really stick in any one spot for more than like a season or whatever the case may be. But maybe he just need the opportunity to stick somewhere, and maybe Atlanta could be that. So I don't want to necessarily prematurely judge him and write him off if that's the case.
Yeah, I think, Corey, I think you were the one that said earlier on Twitter that, there are a decent number of tight ends out there right now who would make nice back of the roster pickups. So maybe later in the summer, if they don't address it now, and, whichever undrafted free agent tight ends that they do pick up don't work out, they might still invest in a veteran guy. There's definitely a couple of names that I wouldn't mind re-adding. And maybe we'll get back Luke Stocker after all, when all's said and done.
Yeah, that seems like
I think there's a lot of potential for that to be like that to be like when everyone's wanting that big free agency signing in that second wave, since that seems like it got delayed to be post draft this year. And then it's just like Adam Schefter comes out and it says we've signed Ed Dixon, which I think would be it'd be fine. But that just seems to be exactly where we're headed with this. It's like everyone's really excited. There's like a rumor that they had like Jabari Sheridan for a visit, or I guess we can't do visits right now, but like thinking about that, or like there's some like pass rusher, and then it's Ed Dixon.
That is a very Falcons Dimitrov move. I know Lance Kendricks is still out there, so I know Dimitrov is definitely eager to pull the trigger on that type of move. So Martin, you threw out the third tight end spot. Is there any other positions that you think the Falcons could potentially target in that 7th round?
I still think the linebacker depth is a bit of a question. It probably falls under the same category of tight end, where there's some clear incumbents and then an XFL guy, and it's really tough with the 3 XFL players that we've signed to know whether or not those are camp body signings, or we really like these guys, we saw tape, we saw they'd taken a step forward from when they last played in the preseason or whatever. So I can see a double dip at cornerback, I can see a double dip at linebacker. I think I get a bit stuck on wide receiver, though. I still kind of feel like having Laquan Treadwell as the number 4 there. I assume the number 4 just doesn't feel like the way that we tend to do competition within the team. So I'm a bit surprised that that's where that sits.
So you think there's you feel like wide receivers option to bring in somebody else to bolster that spot?
I would like wide receiver. I mean, the only other spot where I really think we should in the 7th round we should kind of look seriously would be running back, and that's not because I think the team needs to draft a follow-up for Gurley this year. It's more so that I was a bit surprised that the 2.3 or whatever it is, 2.3 million, let's say, that we're going to pay Brian Hill this year was something that the team was totally comfortable with, given how tight we are up against the cap. If they thought Ito was going to be healthy, which would probably be the biggest question.
Martin, I think your audio went out.
Like a lot to pay for Brian Hill, so.
Okay. All right. Yeah, your audio cut out for a little bit, so we only got the last part of that.
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't have anything.
Yeah, so running back to try and save the money from Brian Hill.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I got you. Yeah, I was surprised that they decided to bring back Brian Hill, and I wonder how much of that was because they didn't know if they were going to be able to get a guy like Gurley to replace Devontae Freeman, and they just needed to have a body there, or if they legitimately have faith in Brian Hill, which they've been pretty sporadic with having the last couple of years, because he's kind of been off and on the roster and didn't really get much of an opportunity last year until there were injuries to Ito. So it's interesting to sort of see them at least this offseason operating from a standpoint where they seem to have total trust in Brian Hill, which really hadn't existed for the 3 previous years. So I'll be eager to sort of see how that gets settled out.
Definitely. I think internet issues are probably my cue to leave. So I'll leave you guys to it, but thank you for having me on. It's been a pleasure.
Hey man, appreciate it. And in hour 3 of the show, adding your accent and some insights to it, and keeping me entertained. So I appreciate it, Martin.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, guys.
Take it easy.
So guys, Corey, you already weighed in on sort of your thoughts on this upcoming season. I'm curious, Dave, do you have the same level of optimism? You feel like this team is, I think we all kind of agree that this team is certainly capable of being a playoff team. Do you feel like, are you optimistic that they'll figure it out this year? Does this draft give you a little bit more optimism, or is it just kind of great, awesome, this is going to be great for the future, but I don't know how much it moves the needle for this upcoming season? Where you sort of fall on that?
Yeah, I'm kind of closer to that, I'd say, than anything else. With the 7th playoff team, I think this certainly can be a playoff squad in 2020. I do think that the Saints being geared up for their last run, the Bucks loading up to try to win this year is going to make that division tougher to get out of. But I do think they can do it. And this draft certainly does make me more optimistic. I think Terrell, Davidson in particular, Hennessy, if he can take over at left guard and be sort of a better option than the potpourri that the Falcons had there coming into the draft, that'll be better. I think Dirk Cutter in his 2nd year can't help but be maybe this much better. So, they're going to be a better football team. I think that'll be enough. But really, I'm more excited about the long-term potential of this class, for sure. I think Walker is a guy that could have a big impact down the line. I don't necessarily know if it's going to be year 1. Hennessy at center is somebody I'm excited about. But, in terms of all the moves they've made this offseason to kind of set them up for now versus the future, I don't know if I look at this defense still and think this year that they're going to be, way, way better than they were a year ago when they were a big part of the problem for this football team. I don't know if the offense is going to take a massive leap under Dirk Cutter. So I think they're kind of still that fringe playoff team without a couple more moves. So I guess we'll see what happens, but that's where I'm at. I do really like this draft class though. And I think, 2, 3, 4 years down the line, we'll probably remember it as one of the better ones of this era.
Yeah, I think that's fair. That's kind of the same standpoint I am. I don't like being in a position where I have to put my confidence in Dirk Cutter for this team to be successful. That's if the negativity that I have looking ahead to the season sort of fills from that, because I did not like, I thought he did a great job in 2012, and then I just felt like it all just fell apart in the subsequent years, and it seems like that always the thing that follows Dirk Cutter wherever he goes. Like Jacksonville, he comes in, they're MJD and Fred Taylor and David Garrard, they all start off great, and then it just sort of slowly peters out over the next couple of years. Comes to Atlanta in 2012, it's all great, we're in the NFC Championship game 10 yards from the Super Bowl, and then it slowly peters out and here, and then he goes to Tampa Bay. He does a great job with Jameis Winston as a rookie, so much that they're like, we got to get rid of Lovie Smith so that we can keep this brilliant offensive mind, so we can have some stability with Jameis Winston. And we saw it slowly peter out. And then for him to come here in Atlanta and then just kind of it all fall apart in year one doesn't give me optimism that it's going to suddenly come together in year two. But maybe, not starting out strong in the first year, we get a different change from the usual pattern with Dirk Cutter, and suddenly he puts it all together in year two. And we're going to need that because, I think the defense is going to be better under Raheem Morris. I think it's going to be better coached, but I don't necessarily know with a bunch of young, inexperienced corners with, relatively fresh faces at the linebacker position. And, I think the defensive line is taken some positive steps, particularly with the Davidson pick, but I don't necessarily know if we're going to be talking about this group of defensive linemen as like, this is one of the best, rotations that we've had in this era. So I don't know how much the Falcons have necessarily put Raheem Morris in a position to succeed, at least in a way to succeed at a high level. I think he can certainly get this defensive unit up to a competent level where it's not necessarily doing what we saw it do in the first half of last season. But it just feels like at some point this offense has to come through, and we got to get Matt Ryan playing at a high level again. And we just haven't really seen that with Matt Ryan and Dirk Cutter and with his quarterbacks over the years. So we'll see how it goes. But it's hard for me to be too enthusiastic because that Dirk Cutter sized hole is boring into the back of my brain. So we'll see how it goes.
My thing with Cutter, though, how much last year was him and how much was the offensive line? Because I feel like that every bad year Cutter's had, I guess that's like kind of discussed as a bad year. The offensive line has just been marred with injuries and a lack of substantial play. And then last year, when Gary's in his first year and obviously took some lumps, and then the two guard spots were largely unsettled. And you really only had Mac and Jake, who I think both weren't quite to their standard without the consistency on the line. But it seemed like when Lindstrom got back in the lineup, and Gary got more comfortable, and they put Schweitzer in at left guard, the offense seemed to play decently well. Maybe not like, the 16 highs or even in 17 when they had kind of that first year of Sarkisian. But I don't know. I feel like that it's just, I don't know how much Cutter did to hurt the team last year as much as he just didn't really have a quarterback that wasn't getting pressured every three throws.
That's fair. I mean, that's fair. I guess my issues is like, I think when you have an offense, when Cutter was at his best in 2012, without going too far back and sort of letting my old biases sort of conflict here, I felt like the reason why the 2012 offense worked is because Cutter's offense at its core is a pretty vanilla offense. So if you do get stability on your offensive line, which we did get in 2012 to a certain extent, and even Stan Baker looked competent that year. And having the three weapons, and basically like his offense in 2012 was, hey, Julio, hey, Roddy, hey, Tony, get open. And because no defense we faced had three quality defensive backs that could cover all three of those guys, every single game, one of those guys kind of went off. So it was basically just finding a hot hand and feeding them. And then when the minute you take that away due to injuries and whatnot in 2013, the offense kind of just bottoms out and is just pretty mediocre. And I felt like this past year, his offense kind of operated that way, but like it's no slight at Austin Hooper or Calvin Ridley or even Julio Jones at this point in time. But I think playing that type of football now in 2019 and 2020 doesn't work to the same degree as it did in 2012, because I think offenses have gotten way more complicated and way evolved a lot more, and defenses are much better able to sort of stop those types of vanilla offenses. And I think that's kind of the thing that holds back Dirk Cutter. And without that changing, and that to me has been his MO throughout his entire career, I can't be overly optimistic that we're going to see a significantly better product this upcoming season.
Yeah, I think, trend lines for him just don't seem to change that much, right? Like we all made fun of him for his run game tendencies a year ago, but those are kind of the same run game tendencies he's had forever. And I don't know that adding Todd Gurley or, adding a new speedy back in the 7th round or as an undrafted guy is going to do anything with that. So he's just not a brilliant offensive mind, I guess I'd say. And that can work if you're elite across the board and you can just kind of overwhelm teams, but it just doesn't feel like when the going gets tough, Dirk Cutter gets smarter, I guess, at the end of the day.
Yeah, and I think that was the big knock on Sark, where it was like when you play the top defenses, when we play Minnesota, when we play Philadelphia, his limitations are going to show because his offensive line, our offensive line is going to get pushed around by their fronts, as they did many times. He's going to run pretty vanilla route concepts, and all of a sudden, you have Julio Jones go quiet in some of those games. Part of that's due to the coverage of guys like Xavier Rhodes, but a lot of that is just he's not really throwing any new wrinkles at defenses to really challenge them in major ways. And against the better teams, and we saw that particularly in 2017 in the postseason, against those better high level defenses, there's a ceiling there. And I feel like that's the same thing with Dirk Cutter. There's just the ceiling is not particularly high. Now, you can maybe make an argument that the floor is higher than maybe it was with Steve Sarkisian, although that didn't look to be the case last season. But I think it's just, basically what Dave said, where it's just when the going gets tough, you can't really trust in your offensive coordinator to really bring a whole lot to the table to give you an edge in some of these games.
Yeah, I think that's certainly fair. I feel like that you've got a nice point that they really just went with a hot hand in 2012. I always felt like Cutter's offenses were the best when they just loaded talent around him. And it's like, I feel like he won't get in your way if things are going well. Like, I don't actively feel like he's one of the play callers that tries to just like kind of flex his chops a little bit, like we saw with someone at a certain game in the past couple of years. But, I feel like that's why I've kind of hoped the whole time they really would build around the offense and try to put a lot of talent around there, because I feel like with Cutter, he can do a good job if he's got the pieces. Like, it's kind of like, I don't think he's an organic talent like a Shanahan who can just make, some random type, like, who's it? DJ Lavela be a decent, like, red zone option. Like, I'm not exactly expecting that with Cutter, but I don't know. I feel like that while I think you guys are absolutely on point with the fact that he really isn't going to like go the extra mile and isn't going to be someone whose brain can be leaned on in like a crunch time situation, which I guess is not exactly everything you want to have an offensive coordinator. I'm hoping that with Ridley taking a leap and maybe with Hurst coming in, kind of blossoming in his new feature role, and the offensive line finding more stability, that like the best version of what this can be could come out. And obviously if injury strikes, which obviously none of us hope it does take away that potential a little bit. And I feel like that it is kind of bitter grapes to know that Kubiak had gotten the job like a week after. They just waited a little bit, but I'm hopeful. I feel like that's all you can be, is just kind of hopeful that the best of what this can be can come out. I mean, I feel like realistically that they are going to have to lean on the strengths of both sides of the ball if they really do want to make some sort of a push to anything further than where they've been the past few years. But, I feel like that I don't think Cutter's a bad offensive coordinator. I guess I feel like he can be good under the right circumstances, and I'm just hoping that with maintaining that presence with Hurst at tight end, maybe not quite as impactful as Hooper right away, but in trying to build up that offensive line just a hair enough that it will kind of come through. But we'll certainly see.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I think that point of he's not a bad offensive coordinator. Like maybe this name isn't, maybe it has a negative reaction when I say it, but like to me, he's like the Andy Dalton of offensive coordinators. Like he can get the job done, but you're never going to feel great about the job that he's doing. He's just kind of like, he's competent. He can get the job done. If you have the right pieces around him, run game, weapons, defense, as we saw early in his career in Cincinnati, they won games. But the minute some of those things go away, they stopped winning games because your quarterback's not necessarily going to do a whole lot to elevate, but he's also not going to be like the worst option. You can definitely have quarterbacks that are going to hurt your chances of winning, which we saw the Tampa Bay Buccaneers go through with Jameis Winston. And so, if we're continuing the quarterback analogy, I think that's Dirk Cutter is the Andy Dalton of offensive coordinators.
I think he can be Derek Carr. I do think when he rises to the occasion, he can be certainly Derek Carr.
Okay.
Boy, the Andy Dalton of offensive coordinators. If he doesn't put that on his resume, he's missing out, man. It's so true though. It's and that I think was my really big frustration when they did hire Cutter, is that you saw what Kyle Shanahan did for you and how transformative that was in 2016, and then you tried to follow it up with Sark with kind of mixed results, although I still think he was basically fine too. And then you go back to the guy who was somewhat effective, from 2012 to 2014. It felt really safe and like relationship based with Matt Ryan rather than, let's get somebody who's going to blow the doors off the league for us. And it doesn't seem even this off season necessarily that like the pressure is really on this regime and they're all in danger of losing their jobs tomorrow if something goes wrong. It just doesn't feel like that. It feels like they're kind of just going along, doing things at their own pace, living life.
Yeah, my conspiracy theory with the hiring of Cutter is, as I think everybody well knows, Kubiak was the option. The Broncos shut that down. The Falcons got impatient. If they had just been a little bit patient, they maybe would have been able to snag him later, as the Vikings were able to do. But I think essentially my conspiracy theory is Dan Quinn wanted, because he was taking over the defense, he wanted a bunch of guys that had head coaching experience that could basically be the CEO of the offense. Because I think that's really what Kyle Shanahan was when they hired him. He was like, basically Dan Quinn's like, I'm here to fix the defense. I'm giving you all control of the offense. I don't want to have to spend any time worrying about this. I trust you to do your job. That's why they brought in all these Kyle Shanahan assistants. Pretty much everybody except for, Wade Harmon and Terry Robisky had experience working with Kyle Shanahan on their offensive coaching staff. And then when Shanahan left and all those assistants left with them, with the exception of the great Chris Morgan, I felt like they were kind of twisting in the wind, trying to fill those gaps. And we saw some of the results of that. And then they brought in some different guys in Greg Knapp in 2018 and whatnot. But getting back to the Dirk Cutter point, I think they were really targeting a coach that had head coaching experience, because I think Dan Quinn wanted to go back to, since I'm calling defense, I don't want to have to worry about the offense. So they bring in Mike Mularkey, also a former head coach. They have Raheem Morris, former head coach. They have Dirk Cutter, former head coach. I'm probably forgetting. I think even the offensive line assistants were college head coaches or something like that. So they had all these guys that could basically, had experience being the CEOs of their various teams. And so Dan Quinn could just basically leave them to their own devices. And obviously it didn't work out. And meanwhile, the guy that he had worked with in Seattle, and Darrell Bevell, doesn't have that head coaching experience. But essentially, when you watch what Detroit did this year when they hired Darrell Bevell, is they basically ran the offense that I think Dan Quinn wants this team to run, which is a lot of play action, You know, a lot of vertical passing, big splashy plays. We saw Kenny Galladay explode this year, and you want to see that from Calvin Ridley. I don't think this offense is really conducive to getting that type of play out of him. So hopefully we see some changes there. But I feel like Dan Quinn just kind of wanted to take a hands-off approach to the offense and wound up hiring essentially the wrong guy, because he wanted more of a CEO type rather than a guy that actually fit the type of offense that he actually wants to run in Darrell Bevell. That's my own personal conspiracy theory.
It sounds probably pretty accurate to me. And that's kind of the thing. There's nothing to be done about it at this point, but it is, one of those things where I think for people who have a tough time trusting this team to do the right thing right now, and that was very much me also coming into this draft, and I have been impressed so far. You look at it and you say they've just made so many decisions that, with the benefit of immediate hindsight, we're talking like a month or so later, don't look great. And so to see them kind of take a step back and make moves that are pretty savvy this offseason by and large, I'm still not 100% sure where I land on Gurley. But, it's been kind of refreshing, and I'm hoping that, a year from now we'll look back on this and say, okay, they kind of, after falling apart for a couple of years in slow motion, they've really figured this thing out. Because contrary to what some people might think with my comments about Dirk Cutter, I don't actually want everybody to get fired. I would love it if the Falcons went back to being a playoff team this year. So knock on wood, which I guess I have over here.
Yeah, I'm the same way, Dave. I'm skeptical because I overthink these things. So I tend to overthink them to the point of having too many questions to come down and be overly optimistic. But, I think there's a pathway for them to have success. I'm not super confident that they will land on that pathway, just because I went into last season very confident about they're going to figure it out. 2018, the injuries, they had some weird wonky stuff, some bad breaks or whatever, and it'll be smooth sailing. And we saw what happened in the Minnesota game. They came back strong for the Philadelphia game. We're like, okay, we get our season back on track. And then we saw what happened. And so, 2019 really was their opportunity to restore some faith into me. And even despite the strong finish at the end, I can't erase the fact that they got the break speed off of them by the Titans and the Cardinals in the first half of the season. Those were two cupcake type of wins for them. Everybody said, well, the Titans made it to the AFC Championship. Not with Marcus Mariota. They were struggling to score even a touchdown when Mariota was starting the quarterback. And so those were their get-right games, and they couldn't get right. And then we sandwiched that in between the Texans game. It was just – I can't block that out of my brain. So it's one of those things where it's like, when we've seen this team needing to – when their back is against the wall, they haven't always responded. They did at times in the second half of the season, but it was too late by that point, And so, I would love to be able to say, okay, all the talk of momentum coming into the season, we actually see this team actually show up for a week 1 game, which when was the last time we came out of a week 1 game feeling good about the Falcons in their season? 2015, when they beat Chip Kelly's Eagles. So I would love to see that happen. And so if that does happen, then I think that would definitely restore my faith that, okay, maybe this season, but obviously so many things have to happen between now and whenever we get a week 1 game that don't involve football. So we'll just have to see about that. But for the meantime, we can at least operate under the assumption that football will resume as normal on time. If for no other reason, just to preserve our sanity as we're cooped up in our houses all day.
It's going to be, I've thought a little bit about what's going to happen if there's a delayed start and no real off-season program, and what we're going to write about and talk about that whole time. And I quickly go insane, so I'm hoping that it doesn't happen. I'm going to be debating the merits of Russell Gage for a solid month.
This
But-
would be the year though that they just completely like explode and are a great team again, and then like the season gets canceled, and then it's like they get like right to December. It's like, oh, we're gonna make a playoff push, and then the playoffs disappear because of COVID.
Oh,
That's what I'm expecting.
Corey,
I
no.
can't There's not a more Falcon-y scenario than that.
Yeah.
No, I am looking forward to. I have to say, I would love it if not only the Falcons made the playoffs, obviously, but if this was the year that maybe the Saints and Bucks, for all the expectations around them, don't do as well as people think, and particularly the Buccaneers, just with the apply Patriots Band-Aid roster building philosophy here. I would love to see that fall apart. So that is something to look forward to too. I think for Falcons fans, I'm a little concerned about where the Panthers are going to be a couple of years from now, but those other two teams maybe not so much.
And I think, this point has been brought up before. Are the Falcons, because they have a veteran coaching staff, a little bit better positioned to navigate a disrupted offseason than maybe some of these other teams that have a lot more moving parts with the coaching staff or with the personnel or whatnot? I think that's a fair thing to discuss. Obviously, we'll have to sort of see how that plays out. We can sit here and be like, yeah, they're going to be just fine if they have to start training camp late, and then we get to week 1 and they have to play the Chiefs or something like that, and then they get beat by 40 points or something like that. Then that completely goes out the window. But we'll just sort of have to see how it plays out. But I do think that's something that's at least worth talking about, that by sheer accident that of Arthur Blank giving them that vote of confidence, that maybe he will luck his way into a more successful situation. And, that sounds bad, but I won't be complaining if just want them to win games. So if they have to cheat due to a cheat in terms of a global pandemic hitting and wiping out other people's chances of being successful, then so be it. One time, can the Falcons benefit from some good luck and everybody else crashing and burning, possibly?
It would be just amazing if this was the year for them. Just the pandemic year, like no off-season program, everything going wrong. Like, hey, how's it going?
What up, man?
It's
Not much.
Oh, there's Corey. Hey, Corey.
So excited, and he was like, "Oh, hey, Corey, what's up?"
I'm more excited to see Corey than my own face. So, yeah, we were just talking about this being, potentially like unexpectedly good year for the Falcons with the veteran staff, and it being a global pandemic and everything going wrong, locusts coming from the sky. So it seems like the Falcons kind of year.
Yeah, if there was a year for them to win the Super Bowl, it'd be this year. Dave, I think you muted yourself.
Yeah, I have a habit of doing that. But it really does feel like, at least they're putting themselves in a solid position. I feel like they're definitely a better team than they were a little while ago. And, I don't think we can ever take that for granted coming into the draft. And, if Dimitrov doesn't trade up at some point here, will this be his first draft class without a trade? I think it will be.
I hope that his trade up is with Minnesota trading away Jamon Brown, picking up a 6th and a 7th. That'd be a more unique trade up. And they need offensive linemen, and Brown is still better than half the crap pile that is in Minnesota.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea. I hadn't thought about trading veterans, but that left guard situation is pretty jammed up at this point.
Although, will a 6th and 7th round pick give us more than Jamon Brown would? Probably.
Yeah, I don't know. I was a little surprised, I guess, that the coaching staff soured on him to the extent that they did last year. I know he wasn't great, but certainly they kept trotting Carpenter out there until they couldn't anymore. And I thought, honestly, that he had the worst season than Brown. So
Same.
Odd. Yeah.
I think that's why they took Hennessy in the 3rd. I think short-term goal for him, the more I watch of him, if he's not starting at left guard, I don't know what they're doing, because he's like that ideal left guard, at least for this year. And then long-term, he's that center that they really would want for this scheme.
Yeah, it sounds like, they said that he was going to play left guard this year. And, given the flotsam and jetsam that they have there right now, it seems like a decent bet. He'll end up starting there. And I wonder what kind of cascade effect that has on the rest of the roster. Whether we get Gono back at swing tackle or what happens from there, because they certainly have not addressed that to this point in this class.
I wonder if they decide that Michael Walker ends up being the starting strong side linebacker too. Like that's kind of the best fit for him when you go back and you kind of watch some of his tape. He's playing defensive end half the time. And he looks a lot more like Devondre Campbell than like KJ Wright when you watch him on the film. Or Devondre Campbell than like Deion Jones or Foye, even on the tape. So I think that's going to be his long-term role. But they got a lot of guys who do well on special teams. They got guys who block a lot of kicks. They got Walker. They got this Jalen Watkins guy who's like a special teamer. Like, to me, they seem to be focused on that. Even Marlon Davidson had like 4 blocked kicks in college. So I think that was a focus that people are kind of underestimating in this draft. And that could be an impact where that third unit that no one talks about and is kind of like the redheaded stepchild of every team is finally getting some attention by the Falcons.
Yeah, and I mean, I look at teams and it's something that they always kind of focus on, and it made me a little concerned when they decided to let guys like Ishmael, who have been reliable contributors, go. So, if a couple of these guys and then whoever ends up being their 7th round pick end up being contributors there, that's probably a net positive for them. Certainly they've had some shaky special teams units and misadventures over the years. So, no thank you to those.
Yeah. Going back to a point that Scott made, I don't see Hennessy as a guard at all. Like, I just think that's them being very optimistic about his fit. I think he'll get some practice reps there, but I don't see. I mean, to me, if he's starting at guard, that to me is not a testament to Matt Hennessy being great. That's a testament to the Falcons. Whatever happens this upcoming season, just a complete cluster fudge, as they say, of what happens at the guard position. They have 4 guys, potentially ahead of him that fit that position a lot better. So I feel like the whole guard talk of Hennessy is just, I just don't see it.
I guess we'll see. I mean, at minimum, there's like 5 guys they can throw at that left guard position. So in that way, it kind of feels like the Falcons have for the last handful of years had 1 or 2 clear options competing for a position, but this feels kind of like the Mike Smith era in between, where it was like, well, we've got some guys, let's see what happens. So, if it ends up not being Hennessy, at least there are 4 other guys who are technically capable of playing left guard. And on that note, I got to run. Good to see you guys.
Yeah, same here, guys.
Take it easy.
All right, guys.
And,
Appreciate you guys.
May that 7th round pick be a Hall of Famer.
All right, man.
Go Falcons.
Aaron, good to see you.
Bye, guys.
See you, Dave.
But if it's a Hall of Famer, it's Devin Hester, not like an actual Hall of Famer.
Yeah. It'll be a Hall of Fame special teams guy, I guess.
Will we see Matthew Slater in the Hall of Fame? Maybe.
I mean, who's the guy from the Bills?
Steve Largent? No, that was the Seahawks.
Tasker, Steve Tasker.
Steve Tasker, yeah.
Yeah.
Got the first name.
Yeah. What round are they? Are we in the 5th? Okay, yeah, we are in the 5th. Okay.
Yeah, we're in the 5th. I had to go write those articles, so I said, let me do that, and then that way I'm not clacking on the keyboard, because that's probably what y'all were hearing earlier.
Okay. Yeah, I was wondering what that noise was.
Because it probably left right when I was done, so.
Yeah, it did.
I was sitting there writing the articles. I'm like, yeah, I'm probably clacking on the keyboard too loud. I type heavy, so we'll just worry about the rest of it later. Have you watched any of the film on Hawkins since?
Mm-mm. No,
Yeah.
been too busy trying to drive this bus to really sit down and watch any YouTube.
I saw a couple of the highlights they put on TV. I saw a couple of things that they put on Twitter. I went and watched a game that he played while I was writing up his breakdown. There's a lot of potential there, like a lot. And he doesn't have a lot of tackle stats, and I went and watched his film to figure out why. And it was more because of his role than anything else. He was basically playing a cover 2 strong safety most of the time. And that's kind of where I think they're leaning towards with him. I don't think he's a starter long term. I don't think that's the goal. I think he's more depth, can play either spot, and ideally that's his best role.
I mean, from what I read up on him, he sounds like a hard-hitting box safety that, you know, may benefit from playing in our scheme with the cover 3 and sort of roving over the middle of defense and being able to light up guys in the pros a little bit better than he can in college. So it seems like, at least from based off of that initial impression, and again, obviously I've only seen maybe a couple of highlights from him so far, so I can't really talk about that. But it does seem like the Falcons were getting their depth behind Keanu Neal, and that tells us kind of what they see with Jamal Carter and Sherrod Eastman, that they felt like they needed to get some depth there. And that was a big question for me, because going into the offseason, it felt like that was a big hole, given how big an issue their depth at that spot has been the last couple of seasons, where you kind of see this defense falling apart because they don't have that type of player to step in when Keanu Neal's been out. And so if Hawkins can be more of that dude, then, you know, I like the pick if that's the case. So later today, when I get the chance to sit down and watch him, I'm hoping to see that type of player.
Yeah, he kind of seems like the kind of player that Keanu Neal is, where he's going to hit you, stand over you, and be like, what now? I'm going to, like, what you going to do about it?
Yeah.
I love that kind of player.
Yeah.
He's got that same kind of attitude you heard from Marlon Davidson. You see it in his film, the same way you see it in Marlon Davidson's film. It's just, it was out of left field from us, but that's just where we're seeing.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, because like I figured safety could be a position that they would address, but certainly Hawkins was not high enough on my radar as a guy that I felt like, you know, so when they drafted him, I was like, I don't even know who this dude is. So we'll just sort of have to see how it all turns out.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. It's weird this year, though, when you don't do any of the research and then you see these guys like Jalen Hawkins and you're like, who did they just take?
Yeah. I mean, I did a little bit of research, so it wasn't like I was just like, you know, I probably could rattle off like 15 safeties in this draft class, and he wasn't on that list. So that's.
I could have rattled off like 6. And it was just the guys that I always was picking towards the end of the draft when I was doing my like little mock drafts throughout the year. Like, oh yeah, Jordan Fuller, Alohi Gilman, like those guys. But I still had never watched a couple of these guys play. And Jalen Hawkins was one of them. So doing my quick dive to where I felt like I actually had some idea of what he was as a football player. He's a hell of a special teams guy, though. He does everything he needs to do there. I think
that sounds like it.
Important.
Yeah.
Like long term, that's going to be important because you need good special teams guys. If you don't have good special teams guys in the NFL, you're probably going to have the worst field position, and see what happened to the Falcons in 2017. Or not really 2017, 2018, 2017, 2018. Falcons had awful field position, and that was killing them. And that's why I think they're going to look at a returner.
Yeah.
I think that's their next guy. Oh, there's Bryce Hall going off the board finally in the 5th round to the Jets.
Yeah, you're talking to the special teams matter guy, so you don't have to Tell me.
That's true. You are the special teams matter. You're the punters or people two guy of the old school group that we had on the Falcon Central Radio podcast.
Yeah.
You were always like, yeah, we need to worry about this more and more. And I was always like, if your defense is good and your offense is good, the rest will take care of it. But I'm on board with you on that now. I'm a convert.
I knew I would eventually wear you down. Oh, a kicker just went.
Oh, was it Rodrigo?
No. Some guy I'd never even heard of. Justin Rohrwasser, the Patriots, just took a kicker.
The Patriots always do that kind of stuff. Yeah, I don't know enough about kickers to where I can be like, oh, yeah, that guy's going to be great. Couldn't tell you the first thing about any kicker. To me, the best kicker is the one that kicks the most through the uprights. So I would go through and be like, all right, let's see what his kick potential was, what his kickoff percentage was, what his, actual kicking field goal percentage was. Yeah. And that's all I would care about.
Yeah, I will admit that I do a lot more box score scouting when it comes to kickers and punters than I do with pretty much any other position.
Like, to me, Nick Skiba out of Wake Forest is probably one of the best kickers in college football because he had 96% of his kicks go through the uprights. Like, that's what I'm looking at. Where the dude who ends up winning the Ray Guy Award or the what is it? The kicker award.
I don't know.
Let's see, college kicker award. The Lou Groza.
Lou Groza, yeah, you're right.
Yeah, so if I'm looking at who the Lou Groza winners are every year, it's like, all right, well, let's see how these guys actually did when they were in college football or in the pros. 97, Martin Gramatica, okay. 98, Sebastian Janikowski. 99, Sebastian Janikowski. 2000, Jonathan Ruffin. No idea who that is. 2002, Nate Kading. That was okay. Seth Marler. Mike Nugent. Alexis Cerna. Art Camardi. Like, Graham Gano won this award, and he's like a mediocre kicker to me. Kai Forbath won it. Dan Bailey won it. Cairo Santos won it. Roberto Aguayo, the world's biggest second-round bust, won it. Kaimi Fairburn won it. Zane Gonzalez, Matt Gay. Like, a bunch of these guys won it, and it's like, who even are these guys? So when it comes to kickers, I just couldn't tell you. And Rodrigo Blankenship won it, kicking 82% of his field goals through, which would have ranked 32nd in the nation. So I couldn't tell you if he'd be a good pick in the 7th round.
Yeah.
Especially now with his, he does okay with kickoffs. He does okay. You actually can rely on stats for that and know exactly what he's doing. But I don't know. Taking a kicker, I couldn't tell you who any of these guys are.
Yeah, the only kickers I know about are Blankenship and Tyler Bass because they're, one went to Georgia and one went to Georgia Southern. They were both at the Senior Bowl or whatever. That's about it.
Now, XFL players, I could probably tell you a little bit better about. Like that dude that got drafted, by the Panthers, Kenny Robertson?
Mm-hmm.
That dude was good in the XFL. And I
didn't watch the XFL this year.
It was pretty cool. Like,
that's what I heard. It just during the week, I'm so busy doing stuff that weekends I'm like, I just want to take a break from football. So in the spring, so I didn't watch AAF. I didn't really watch the XFL all that much. It's just one of those things where, I love football, but it's one of those times where it's just like I can't do it year round.
He got kicked out of West Virginia for academic fraud. But in the XFL, he got a chance to actually play half a season and give NFL teams an idea of what he would look like and get some development as a player. And he was pretty good. He can track a ball. Now, I don't know if he's going to be this amazing NFL player, but he's going to make some plays on the ball and get some interceptions and plays where we're going to go, why did we throw it his direction?
Okay. Bucks just got Tyler Johnson. I thought he was going to be one of those good wide receivers that in a normal year he'd go in round 3, but this year he goes in round 5 because of the depth of the draft. And I like him as a slot receiver. He's a big slot.
He's probably going to see a ton of snaps there too, because they've got Justin Watson from last year or from 2 years ago, Scott Miller from last year, Spencer Schnell and Jaden Mickens as the only other like guys on their roster behind Godwin and Evans. So Johnson should see a lot of snaps in that third spot.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of those sneaky good picks. You know, even though Gronk and Howard are probably playing 2 tight end roles, you'll see Gronk probably as like more of a big slot. I think you're going to see a lot of Johnson on the field too.
Yeah. I mean, he basically like single-handedly beat Auburn in the bowl game. Like he absolutely obliterated Auburn in that game. That was the only reason that Minnesota won that game.
That quarterback from Minnesota is pretty solid too, though.
Yeah,
I think people sleep on him.
I forget his name, but I know what you're talking about. All right. Well, we are coming up on 3:00 and 3.5 hours. For anybody who's still tuned in, I appreciate you guys tuning in. But this is another opportunity. I feel like I'm starting to run out of steam a little bit. I appreciate, Scott, you joining me, but I think when the clock hits 3:00 Eastern, I will probably shut off the stream. So anybody who's still watching, I'm putting the link if you want to join the show in the YouTube chat. And if you want to jump on in these last 10 minutes to share your thoughts, ask your questions, or whatever the case may be, I definitely appreciate if you guys would do so. But
well, let's look and see some of these questions from the past couple hours. Thoughts on Shea Patterson?
I have none. Every time I watch Michigan, I don't think he was particularly good. So that was my thoughts on him.
Agreed. And then
I see David McCallan asks, this is a draft depth draft, guys. Next year with the 11 picks, we'll be replenishing the roster. I don't know if we have 11 because I think we're only getting 3 comp picks next year.
4.
But is it 4?
So Schweitzer is going to qualify for a 6th round pick. Campbell is going to qualify for a 6th round pick. Beasley's qualifying for a 5th. I might have gotten Beasley and Campbell backwards. And then Claiborne actually signed a big enough deal to qualify for a 7th.
Oh, okay. I forgot about the Claiborne. Okay.
So more than likely they're looking at 11 picks next year, which I think would be the most in the Dimitroff era since like 2008.
Yeah.
So it could be a good draft. Hopefully they're picking 32 at every single one of those spots, and it looks like a New England Patriot style draft. We're at a point where if they traded away Jamon Brown for, say, a 6th round pick in training camp and James Carpenter for a 7th in training camp, I wouldn't be shocked either. And heading into next year with 13 picks and you got Thomas Dimitroff running the draft, they're going to finish with 7, but they'll be a lot higher than what they were before. So that's just a thought there. Dimitroff would not like to take more than 7 or 8 players in a draft outside of that first draft.
Well, I think they're going to need as many picks as they possibly can get, because I think the problem they're going to run into next offseason is it's going to be similar to this last offseason, where they're going to let a lot of guys go in free agency. You got Tat coming up. You got Casey coming up. You got Keanu Neal coming up. You got Matt coming up. Obviously, some players that they've already drafted could replace some of those spots, but I don't know if the Falcons are going to have a lot of room from a cap standpoint to be able to be particularly active in free agency. Maybe they can get like a similar free agent haul like they did this year with like one big splash move like Dante Fowler, one more medium-sized move like a Todd Gurley. But I think there's going to be a lot more roster turnover in the near future. And so having 11 picks, if they do have them, including a bunch of day 3 picks, I think will help them sort of fill some of those holes and be able to replenish this roster and get some talent on the back end.
So interestingly enough, they only really have $200 million worth of cap liabilities right now on that roster for next year. As far as what they have in terms of cap space, there's a $215 million projected cap already. So they're kind of already looking at a projected cap of about 15 million in cap space. Take out the rookies, probably about 10 million next year. But there's also thought that the cap could jump up another, say, $20-25 million based on this new collective bargaining agreement, because they are getting an additional percentage point than what they were getting before. So that's a lot of money when you're thinking about it as 215 million is the projection for 47%. So 215 divided by 47, and if they go up to 48, divided by 58 times 48. If they go up to 48, it ends up being, 225, 230. So they could really have a big change. And then there's potential for more income, because if they move to that 17th game in 2021, that's going to affect the cap the same amount. So that 221 divided by 16 games times 17 games could go up to about 235. So that's where you could see a huge jump in cap. And you'll see a lot of these guys that have these 16-game contracts look at them for 17 games, and the minimum salaries aren't going to be affected that much.
Okay, I hear you. We'll see how it goes. I mean, I think they'll have ways to maneuver their cap situation, because they're going to have to restructure Matt Ryan's contract because he's counting like $40 million. So they'll get some cap space from that. But I don't know. I think we're going to see a similar situation for this team, where they're going to be a little bit hesitant to pay big dollars for some of their own guys, as well as potentially going out there and going on a spending spree to put themselves back in cap predicament. So we'll see how it all turns out. But I mean, at least they have a little bit more wiggle room than maybe I was giving them credit for. So that's a positive.
Yeah, it could end up being a situation where they enter free agency with the new cap projections right around 230, with assuming 230 on the cap, $30 million in cap space. And $30 million in cap space is a lot of money, no matter where you're at, to start out with. And then you add that Ryan switch, you add that Julio Jones restructure as well. That probably opens up another 15 million. They should have the money to re-sign some of their guys. I just don't know if it's going to be the guys that we want.
Mm-hmm. We'll see. Anybody in the chat, if you have any questions, by all means, send them in. We got about 3 minutes left on the clock. So any last minute thoughts before we sign off here? For those of you that are tuned in recently and haven't been through this entire 3.5 hour extravaganza, the general thoughts from pretty much everybody that's come through here is that the Falcons have done a good draft. Regardless of where you land on AJ Terrell, he's going to definitely help their cornerback group and potentially could be their number one corner for the long term. Marlon Davidson, big hit, I think, with the fan base, understandably, can provide some pass rush presence and certainly long term, I think, can be a real difference maker in the middle of their D line as he continues to develop. And Matt Hennessy has the potential to solidify and anchor their offensive line for many, many years to come. I don't think anybody should be expecting him to be Alex Mack 2.0, but certainly a solid starter. I think I compared him earlier to somewhere on the spectrum between Todd McClure and Alex Mack, and hopefully, closer to Alex Mack on that spectrum. And who else did we get? Michael Walker. Again, haven't watched him, but everybody seems to think that he can come in, play some Sam linebacker, play some special teams, add some athleticism and some toughness to that linebacker group that sorely needs it. And then Jalen Hawkins, the big hard-hitting safety. Again, haven't really watched him, but a guy that at least gives you some value on special teams and may bring a little bit more physicality to that safety room that you don't have beyond Keanu Neal. So definitely a really solid draft for the Falcons here. I appreciate everybody for tuning in, hanging out with me as my brain ceases to function, running low on caffeine. Appreciate Scott, appreciate Dave, Corey, Martin, Noel, Matt, Tony, Adnan, coming through. I'm probably forgetting other people that came through and gave their thoughts. Hopefully we'll be back on Falcon Central Radio on Thursday to give you a recap of this entire draft class. Certainly by then I will have watched all these guys and we'll be able to give you some input into that. And then we'll keep the Saturday thing going with some film breakdowns here on Falcon Central Radio. We've done pro football players in Todd Gurley, Hayden Hurst. Who else did we pick up this offseason? Laquan Treadwell and Dante Fowler. As you guys know, my brain is shutting down. I'm trying to get this all out. So if you wanted to see the draft series, we interviewed several players that got picked. Josiah DeGuara went to Green Bay, I think. Alex Highsmith went to the Steelers. I don't think Francis Bernard has been picked, which is disappointing me. Maybe the Falcons can snatch him up in round 7 out of Utah. AJ Green, I don't think has been picked, but I haven't been paying that much attention to all the picks in day 3. The cornerback out of Oklahoma State. And so check out those interviews if you want to know more about those players and see the type of players that those teams are getting. Hopefully we'll be able to have a few more conversations with some of these rookies since I know they're not reporting to mini camps anytime soon. So we'll be able to get some more rookie interviews coming up. And what was the other thing I wanted to plug? Follow Falcon Central Radio on Twitter at Falcons PFC, on Facebook at Falcon Central Radio. Of course, like and subscribe to Pro Football Central here on YouTube. Scott, now that I've plugged everything, let the people know what you're doing, Twitter, what you're writing up at DraftWire and elsewhere.
So I'm just at the Falcons Wire right now. I do a little bit with DraftWire, but nothing too much this year. And yeah, just hit me up at Karasik S. You see it on the screen, spelled just like that, and follow me, and I'll be able to. I like to talk football with everybody, so go ahead and hit me up, and I'll talk football with you. That's all I really got.
Guys, man, I really appreciate you guys hanging out for 3.5 hours, listening to us meander through draft takes and Falcon takes. So a lot of great stuff in there. So definitely share the video. We might wind up chopping up some pieces of it for later posts here on the channel. So definitely appreciate it, guys, and have a good day. Enjoy the rest of the draft. Have a good weekend. Get out of the house after the draft is over, because I know we've all been cooped up watching TV and being on Twitter for the last 3 days. So I'm definitely going to take my own advice later on this afternoon. So until then, guys.